I want to call to order this February 19th, 2020 meeting of the Arcata City Council. If you so choose, would you please join me for a flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Could I have a roll call, please? Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
And we had a closed session, and we have nothing to report out from the closed session. Right. Next is ceremonial matters, and first is a certificate of appreciation to Bob Felder to be read by Councilmember Ornelas.
This is a certificate of appreciation presented to Bob Felter. The City Council of the City of Arcata hereby wishes to recognize Bob Felter for his 10 years of dedicated service as a founding member of the Historic Landmarks Committee. Bob's practical approach to historic preservation and years of experience and insight have been invaluable to advancing an appreciation of the history of Arcata's built environment. His input as a licensed contractor and master craftsman has been essential when reviewing applications for rehabilitation projects. He has always brought a practical perspective to the discussion. His enthusiasm for historic preservation and willingness to help with special outreach projects was greatly appreciated by staff and his colleagues on the committee. Bob's preservation work in the community, specifically on the Chapman House in Arcata and the Anne B. Ryan House in Eureka, imbued on our communities his deep appreciation for the quality and craftsmanship of a bygone era. His respectful, down-to-earth, common-sense approach reflected on the city and the community, and his service to future generations through preservation of the past as an enduring legacy. The City Council sincerely thanks him for his service. This is dated today, February 19th, 2020, and signed by Mayor Michael Winkler. Bob?
The Humboldt County Historical Society had their annual luncheon a week ago, which included a slideshow. It was appalling to see some of the buildings in Eureka that had been torn down. One series of photos was a beautifully elaborate mansion that was being smashed to smithereens with a crane with a wrecking ball. There's a 1960s box sitting there right now instead. Arcata has had similar losses, such as the Falk Mansion, where we have Wildberries now. People appreciate the charm of old buildings. They make a more grounded feel in a town and increase community pride. And Arcata is fortunate to have a treasure trove of wonderful architecture. Compare it to towns around LA like Fountain Valley or contemporary McKinleyville with very few attractive buildings. We've had people on this committee, on the Landmark Committee, who thought everything old should be saved, and a liaison for a while who thought the opposite. I don't agree with either. Everything old cannot be saved, but everything old should be considered, and that's what I enjoyed most, being on the committee. One item that was considered was the McKinley statue. It was a distinctive work of art with historical significance and unusual history, and removed in haste. I lost some regard for those who ignored the opportunity that the statue offered to educate people of the wrongs of the era. Removing a statue will never change our past history. In fact, it does the opposite by muting the conversation. Our past, right or wrong, is one of the keys to our future. I don't think I deserve any special recognition for sitting on a committee for 10 or so years. So many in this community do so much more very quietly, but I appreciate the opportunity to serve in a manner which I enjoyed. Thank you.
Next is proclamation recognizing March 8th, 2020 as International Women's Day and honoring the centennial year of women's suffrage, to be read by Councilmember Watson.
Whereas International Women's Day began in the United States in 1909, has been celebrated internationally since 1911, and is an official holiday in 28 countries. And whereas 2020 marks the 100th year of women gaining the right to vote in the United States, and women, people of color, and our allies continue to work to expand and protect voting rights around the world. And whereas we benefit from the talent and spirit of social action that women and girls have made to our cities, nation, and world, we continue to thank and honor our women and girls, appreciate their achievements and contributions to our society, and support their voices as they change the world, bringing peace, justice, and harmony to our communities. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby recognizes March 8th, 2020 as International Women's Day, and encourages all community members to observe this day by participating in local events and working to create a more inclusive world where all genders are able to live to their fullest potential, free from discrimination, oppression, and violence. Signed today, February 19th, 2020, and signed by Mayor Michael Winkler. And accepting, we have Sue Hilton.
I brought some friends. I nearly always do. Thank you. Thank you for the proclamation. And as you heard, International Women's Day has been going on for a long time, and we've been celebrating it here for about 10 years, and now it's part of a week-long event of events celebrating women in the arts that's put on by the Arcata Playhouse. Here's our poster. I'd be happy to give it to anybody who's got a good place to put it. And we're going to be talking, one of the things, usually it's just basically a celebration. There's music, there's food, there's talk by Leslie Castellano from the city of Eureka, partly because we want to talk about votes and voting rights, both because it's an election year and because it's a centennial of women's suffrage. And that's all I have to say. Yeah, but there is a week-long festival events at the Playhouse, so participate.
And now we're going to
Okay.
sing.
Now we're going to sing. I didn't bring my one. Okay.
Hey, look us over, women proud and strong. Time to hear our voices, time to hear our song. Silenced for too long, oppressed as well. But now the earth is crying out and women are responding, saying, let's work together, build, not destroy. Let's study kindness, gratitude, and joy, 'cause the planet is home to all of us, and that's the song we sing. Hear the raging grannies sing. Women together, working with friends, striving for safety because it's time to end domestic violence, rape, and abuse. We can make a better world where people all respond by saying, let's work together, build, not destroy. Let's study kindness, gratitude, and joy, because the planet is home to all of us, and that's the song we sing. Hear the raging grannies sing.
One and two.
Vote, vote, vote for peace, a difference we can make. Verily, 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 democracy's at stake. Vote, 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 and poke into all the news. Warily, 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 warily lies our mind abuse. Vote, vote, vote the truth, note each promised word. Merrily, 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 let our voice be heard. Vote, vote, vote for peace, the difference we can make. For peace, the verily, 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 democracy's at stake. Verily, democracy's at stake.
Thank you.
Next is proclamation recognizing February 25th, 2020 as Spay Day USA, to be read by Vice Mayor Patino.
This proclamation from the City of Arcata recognizes February 25th, 2020 as Spay Day USA, whereas an estimated 7.6 million homeless kittens, puppies, cats, and dogs entered animal shelters in the U.S. in 2019, a little over half of these were adopted. Due to a lack of money and space, 1.5 million were put down, even though many of these animals were healthy, adoptable, and often the offspring of beloved family pets. And whereas animal control programs aimed at coping with the millions of homeless cats and dogs in the U.S. cost taxpayers billions of dollars annually, preventive spaying and neutering has been shown to drastically reduce pet overpopulation. And whereas ending cat and dog overpopulation is a major priority of the Companion Animal Foundation, Redwood Pals Rescue, the Sequoia Humane Society, Humboldt County Animal Control, Friends for Life, Humboldt Spay and Neuter Network, and Miranda's Rescue. These local organizations work tirelessly to educate our community about the importance of spaying and neutering pets. Now therefore be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Arcata hereby recognizes February 25th, 2020 as Spay Day USA, and encourages all community members to end pet overpopulation by having their own animals spayed or neutered, or by sponsoring another cat or dog spaying or neutering through one of our hardworking local animal organizations. This is dated today, February 19th, 2020, signed by Mayor Michael Winkler and Kayla Klass. Thank you.
I can throw something. If I'd known I could sing, that was lovely. So I remember being young and helping out in crisis times when there were animals thrown into my car in Mass, South Jetty. And in 2002, Companion Animal Foundation began. So I guess it's almost an adult. Through that time, it began as a series of thrift stores. Kim Klass, the everything to the organization, not here tonight. But it started as the idea of thrift stores, making a profit, and then putting that money into our animal community because there was a really strong need. Over that time, so many people have gotten on board. There are so many different groups now that are working, and Companion Animal Foundation has shifted as our needs in the community have shifted. At this point, for people who are interested, we have humane education programs. We run summer camps. We've been doing them for years to teach that next generation, because we won't all be around forever, to love the animals and work those tireless hours and pull all-nighters to try and get grants. We have BARK, Be Aware, Responsible, and Kind, where we have received grant money and been able to do outreach into schools to teach that love of animals. And then we're very excited. We finally were able to get a mobile veterinary unit this year, a 35-foot, beautiful. We are still doing fundraising to get some equipment in it, but we're going to be able to go out to those areas that are still having trouble, because in Arcata, you could walk to a vet, and we are so lucky to have such wonderful resources here, and we're really looking forward to being able to expand on the community support that we've had and be able to help in areas where you have to drive an hour and a half or 2 hours to get your animals looked at. So thank you so much for recognizing. At this point, our shelter, from what I have seen, is not euthanizing adoptable animals or, at this point, treatable animals. So that's a really beautiful shift that's happened in our community, and it takes consistency and pushing towards the future. And I look forward to increasing now the quality of life that we're able to offer to our family members with fur. Thank you.
Next is the annual report from the Economic Development Committee.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Jane Woodward, and I'm chair of the Economic Development Committee, and I haven't been here for a while. It's been a number of months. I wonder what ever happened to that project. I presume, or can I presume you've all read the annual report? Can I presume that? So I don't need to restate it? Oh, wonderful. I'm glad.
But you can restate it for the audience.
I can restate it for the audience, not the entire thing. Okay, let me hit the highlights. We have a pretty much brand-new committee of 4 brand-new members, 2 that have been there about a year, and myself who's been there for 10 years. Maybe I'll get one of those that Bob Felter got 1 year. We spent a lot of time orienting new members, asking them to review the city goals and objectives, the Economic Development Strategic Plan, the EDC role, Brown Act policies regarding member communication, and EDC history. We've discussed EDC goals, vision, priorities, and potential projects such as the study of business needs, a business directory, asset mapping, and the use of the Arcata business license database to communicate with businesses more easily. We continued to review the broadband and dig once policy and received a presentation from Connie Stewart, who's the executive director of the California Center for Rural Policy. She basically said, crazy idea, we probably can't afford to do this, was the basic message. Whether that, we dropped that. We're still looking at 5G or considering looking further at 5G options. We did receive presentations on the city's strategic infill redevelopment plan and housing metrics to consider in the market study RFP for housing and economic development and provided input. We formed the Business of the Year subcommittee and worked with council subcommittees, with the council subcommittee to recognize the City of Arcata Business of the Year. Am I allowed to announce who it is? No.
No, that's a secret.
It's coming up. Yeah.
Guess what? Okay. We made recommendations to the Plaza Improvement Task Force and received updates from myself because I was appointed to the task force, and I'm going to distribute to you the task force recommendations. I'm sorry, the Economic Development Committee recommendations, because they're supposed to be attached in there.
These are the recommendations for the plaza? Or
These are the recommendations from the Economic Development Committee made to the Plaza Task Force.
Okay,
and it's probably the major piece of work we did in terms of reviewing options, discussing them, and providing input. That was and you'll hear about it more, we started that April of 2018 and just finished. I want to comment that that was the best task force and committee I've ever been on. Everybody did their fair share. Julie Neander was fantastic. You've got a gem in terms of managing that and getting it done efficiently, effectively. She put in an enormous amount of work to help make us successful, as did every committee member on that task force. So if we could do more of those, we could solve a lot of problems here, and you will find, and I'm sure you've had a chance to look at the recommendations that have come forth. So I want to suggest that it's a model way of tackling problems, and we may want to consider doing that for economic development in the city. We received a report on Arcata business licenses and how data are arrayed and managed. That was in part of trying to say, how can we manage to get at our businesses, not just the ones in the chamber and not just the ones in Main Street, but everybody. So can we access and use the business license database? That appears to be somewhat difficult. We discussed the need for change in Arcata's vacation rental policy. We heard public comment and concluded there was no need to place a lower limit at this time since it only represented about 80 or 100 homes. We made revenue generation recommendations to council. We received a presentation on the city's infill planning efforts. We received a presentation by Cooperation Humboldt's David Cobb and are considering setting up a subcommittee to study public banking. He is now also the representative, he's on the national board for Transition Humboldt, or for Transition USA, and he has now, through this group, also become Transition Humboldt, which kind of dissolved about 2 years ago. We discussed the economic and business effects of the PG&E pre-storm power shutdown. We received a presentation on the city's sixth-cycle housing element and recommended approval. We received a presentation by Arcata Main Street on business issues and priorities. Now, I'm not going to go into our goals and activities because they're quite generic. Supporting strategic infill development, technology upgrades, and business support of a variety of ways. What I do want to do is talk a little bit about the history, and there's a reason for that. On Joe's final day as EDC staff in the fall, he and I, during the meeting with mostly new members, discussed the role that the EDC used to play with respect to being relevant to the city. For example, at the request of council 7 or 8 years ago, we developed and monitored contracts with Main Street, Arcata Chamber, the Film Commission, and Visitors Bureau, receiving quarterly reports and annual presentations. That has been taken over by staff. We have resumed reviews with Main Street already and the Chamber in February. Sorry. We reviewed and revised the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which is now assigned to a contractor with no input from the EDC. I'm not being critical. I'm just saying this is what has happened, okay? We reviewed and sometimes met with applicants for business loans and reviewed draft changes in the business loan program prior to its going final. That's now completely done by the staff. We provided input into the proposed medical marijuana innovation zone while it was being designed and developed. We did a tour of the Creamery District, Food Works, etc., to review and provide input on projects being proposed. We conducted a survey of Valley West business needs and concerns as the city proposed new Valley West plans and presented it to council. Our current pattern is that the EDC gets to comment on things already reviewed by staff and ready to go final, too late for useful input from the EDC. That is, for example, the housing element was received on Friday prior to the Tuesday meeting. It's a rather long document, and which was prior to the Wednesday City Council meeting, at which time it had to be approved in order to meet funding requirements. It was a great report. I mean, they did a fabulous job. No criticism, just saying it wasn't amendable by the time we got to look at it. We approved it, of course. The same thing may happen with the infill report and update to the Economic Development Strategic Plan, which we haven't seen. There are exceptions, of course, proposing the Business of the Year and the Plaza Improvement Task Force engagement. So how to fix this and become more relevant? Because we have limited staff. We don't have the luxury of as much staffing as we had in the past when we could do some of these things a little bit differently. And I recognize that. So I'm not being critical. I'm just saying I want to focus on how can we become more relevant so we don't waste staff's time and we don't waste the time of the citizens participating. So I would like to suggest that we follow the task force model with an assigned EDC member or subcommittee to assist the city in reviewing RFPs and drafts of proposed economic development projects and plans. Direct us to study issues that council wants to learn about, such as ways in which businesses can better meet the needs of changing demographics and the challenges of changing technology. How can we spur economic development with the changing cannabis environment and increased competition? How can we diversify and revitalize our economy to meet these changes? How can we better support our businesses? These are the things that we think matter, okay? We do not wish to waste valuable staff time and the time of members working on issues that are not of interest to council. It would therefore be very helpful for council to suggest ways in which the EDC can be most useful to the community. You don't have to do it right now. I'm just inviting this input because we can go multiple different directions. We have a limited set of things to do. We're picking up, discussing with businesses like Main Street and the Chamber, what do you need? What studies have you done? Should we survey all businesses, and how can we do that together? Because they don't always overlap. What can we do to make our economy and our businesses more successful? That's the challenge we have, and we'd like direction from you if you have particular priorities. Any questions?
Thank you for that report, and thanks for the thoughtfulness of how you're trying to approach this next year. I did have some ideas. I haven't talked to any other council members. I don't know if this is a recommendation from council necessarily, but I've been just thinking about the trades and the training that's necessary for the trades, and I do believe that CR is addressing that a bit, but I thought maybe we could be more proactive about that. So that's something that possibly the Economic Development Committee could look at, is what could we do that would assist moving people into the trades that we need people there. Mm-hmm. And you can't unplug your toilet from China, so you need somebody to show up at your place. So these are important jobs. So anyway, I just wanted to, maybe you guys could look at that. And and then I have arts training here. It seems like we're getting a little bit more to that sort of, maybe training a little bit about sort of arts as a business and arts, how to sell arts and things along those lines. Another way of sort of diversification, I would say. And certainly the trades we have heard that from all the developers, that they need people coming up. And then I just wanted to also just put out, to maybe check in with my fellow council members about 5G, because you said you were thinking about looking at it and, studying it. And if I got it right, I think that we all kind of went, we want to try to figure out how we could dig once, put conduit in.
Exactly.
Wire
The one-dig
things
policy.
and not
Yeah.
need 5G. I think that was kind of our take, but I don't know if we actually made that decision or not. But I just wanted to say that because that's kind of where I'm at. Mm-hmm. And, I was interested a year ago, but now I've learned more. And now I'm like, I really kind of just want to put wire wherever we think we need that, as much as possible. So anyway, those are just some of my thoughts, and maybe some of the direction could be looking at some of that training that we could work with people. I think we could help nurture that.
HSU, we could put together an economic development task force with people from CR, with people from HSU, with people from the business community, and say, what can we do to make things better and go in directions that will work for a small community behind the redwood curtain that's being impacted by the changes in the cannabis business, the technology, everybody buying online, the changing demographics where we have the young people coming in and they're buying online, having it delivered at their door, and they don't go downtown. And HSU has become very self-sustaining. They don't need to come into town. So how can we go some new directions and provide recommendations just like we did are doing with the Plaza Task Force? So that's one of my questions.
Yeah, I like the task force idea, but I have to have something to be tasked. So, let's form a task force, but what's it on? Plaza Improvement Task Force was one block, okay? Very concrete look at things. So when you mentioned the trades, it's pretty wide, but I'm assuming you mean hand-skilled trades like electricians, plumbers, locksmiths, shoemakers, all the things that we don't have much of.
That's just part of it. That's just part of the whole, yeah.
Well, I mean that. I'm not saying any other thing.
Yeah.
You may
Okay.
be thinking of something
Yeah.
else, but I'm not. I'm thinking of the hand blue-collar trades that we don't seem to have here. If you want a locksmith, they got to come from Eureka. So it's got to be significantly more money than here. And what are we doing about that? As far as I know, zero. We may be getting a shoe repair business in town, but it's kind of lacking at this point. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that if somebody comes to town as a student and then they decide to stay or maybe drop out and they love the community, they may not be aware of all these missing trades.
Oh, we're
And
missing
so
the
that task force-
building contractors.
Yeah, right. The task force, in my mind, could focus on how do we retrain, or, well, in this case, it would be training community members to become entrepreneurs and not to invent some tech stuff, but to actually show up at my house and work for $25 to $50 an hour and fix something.
Do you remember the book, The Millionaire Next Door, talking
No,
about
I
electricians,
didn't read that.
plumbers, how they were doing so
Sure.
well when everybody else was going down the tubes because they had a trade
They're needed.
that was needed.
I
Absolutely
cut
needed.
lawns for a living, so I understand
Yeah.
this really well.
Yeah.
And I could have 10 times the clients that I got, but I choose not to
Yeah,
because I got business here. But people are surprised at my hourly rate. And I think that once somebody like you, the committee, would focus on that, then we could create a new community. People that, when you say shop local, well, let me get local help. I don't want to call Eureka to get my lock fixed.
yeah. I mean, there's a whole emphasis on living locally and living sustainably. How do you do that? Okay? Who do you bring in to put in your solar panels? Do we have enough solar panel people? Who sets up, what's the battery system that you can establish and put up? There are a whole variety of things like that. Can we put up local arrays, solar arrays, or local windmills, whatever have you? What can we do? Microgrids. That's that whole segment of what's coming that we could be looking at and training for.
Well, I appreciate the idea, that task force idea, and especially if it's actually going to produce something that we can actually use here.
Well, exactly, and that's what the Plaza Task Force did. And
Yeah.
it's such a good model if we could pull the people together to focus. That's the question. Where do you want us to focus? That would be of economic benefit to
We have to make
Arcata.
agenda item for that because we can't do that right now, I don't
I
think.
know. But thank you. Anybody else have any?
Brett?
Yeah, just looking at your 2020 goals, you have changes in consumer-based retail sales, Amazon and everybody buying everything online, which impacts our retail sales tax. So I feel like it'd be useful if it's of interest to the committee to consider, maybe make some suggestions of business types that the city can support that are providing a service or a product that you cannot get online. And we do have businesses like that in town.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I don't know. What are other business types that we can be more accommodating to fill those?
That
those
would fit
spots?
right in with the trades.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
That would be, what?
Well, I'm talking about
businesses
actually you're going to
can-
occupy a retail storefront.
right. And then,
Yeah. Like a retail storefront.
Ah, okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
And then, I would just also encourage the committee to, in addition to working on council goals, feel free to work on things that are of interest to you. The committee really controls their own agenda, but, the chair gets to set the agenda. So I would, have work on things that you guys think are fun as well and that you believe are beneficial to the city. Because that's why we put you all on there, because we, trusted we were interested in your opinions.
And we have invited the members to propose projects, and we already have gotten a couple of those, and we're exploring those. And we'll continue to. Thank you.
ahead.
I just wanted to comment on your thought about the task force, because I appreciate what you're saying. You just had so much fun on the Plaza Task Force that you felt it was a really good model. And I get that, but I think Councilmember Patino is right that it had such a particular focus that was able to be that way.
Yeah.
So I think the Economic Development Committee is a little broader thinking. But if you just take these couple of things we've even just come up with, looking at really increasing the training in the trades, in looking to get what storefronts could we potentially have here that would be unique and meaningful. And then I would think, some part of me feels like if you're not getting enough at a meeting, maybe meet, 6 times a year or something. That would be okay too. Some committees do that. But maybe you could assign yourself some subcommittees, and particularly on the trades training type of thing, you could, go ahead and coordinate. Rather than try to get somebody from CR on our task force, you could coordinate with them and talk with them and find out what they're up to and how could we help.
Sure.
You could just sort of do some of that background study that we would love to know about, and then be ready to kind of help us figure out how we could move something like that forward, if whatever that is that we would do. I don't know, you'll maybe have some suggestions by then. But
Great.
Yeah, and it's also, just a friendly reminder that it is in the bylaws of our committees that if the committee is welcome to come to the council and speak to the council. You just vote amongst yourselves and agree on a person to represent the committee and send that person as your representative. So that is in there if you want to exercise that.
Good, thank you. I wanted to get your input because this is a singular opportunity to do that. We have ideas, it's not that. It's just that I really enjoy getting your input about what you see the need is. Thank you.
Well, also I have some comments, Shane. Yes, right. As far as trades, one group of organizations that could be helpful, I think that might be worthwhile to reach out to is organized labor. That they have strong tie-ins to apprenticeship programs and other training programs. I think that could be helpful.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, being a person myself who has a home-based business, I think that reaching out to home-based businesses in Arcata, either single-person businesses or sort of distributed multi-person businesses, and connecting them with training or support and things like that, I think that could also be helpful.
And that's why we were trying to get at the business licenses to see if that was a way to contact them directly, rather than putting an article in the paper, press release, whatever have you. Can we just get at them directly? And that's not quite as simple as we thought it might be, but we'll continue to explore that.
Because we have AEDC, we have the Small Business Development Center, and helping businesses in Arcata or people who are thinking of starting businesses to get connected with those organizations or provide other support services.
Thank you.
And 5G is a special case because there's such strict federal laws that in a lot of cases preempt local control. So there are limitations on what authority the city of Arcata has on 5G. I mean, there is some authority, but it's limited. So to understand what that is, I think can be important. And also working with local businesses to emphasize the things that are unique and that can't be provided by online retailers or businesses in other parts of Humboldt County, and helping businesses with that.
Which is a marketing aspect, absolutely. Good. Years ago, I attended some really interesting economic summits at HSU, and I don't know whether they've had one for a long time or I just missed out on recognizing they were there, but we got some really good speakers in with tons of good ideas, and they just they came and went, and I'm not sure what came of the wonderful ideas that came out of that, because there were all kinds of ways of interconnecting businesses to help support each other. Kind of in a circle where, and there are ways we could do that here with databases and things like that. So, and with the Arcata website.
I was also wondering if there are any members of the public who would like to ask any questions of you or make comments on this report. would be interested in coming forward and making any comments or questions relative to economic development in Arcata or this report from the committee? All right, seeing none, I will close public comment and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jane.
All right, next is early oral communications. This 15-minute time period is provided for people to address the council on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral communications, the council may respond to statements. Any request that requires council action will be set by the council for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers addressing the council will be limited to 2 minutes. All other oral and written communications will be heard at this meeting under agenda item 11. So any member of the public who would like to comment on an item that's not on the agenda, please come forward.
My name is Joanne McGarry, and at the last council meeting, a topic came up that I had very little awareness of in terms of what is put in our water, our drinking water here in the city of Arcata. So I've done a little bit of research, and I've talked to a lot of people and recognized that a vote was taken 14 years ago in regards to this issue, but new information has come out, and talking to a lot of young parents, actually, they're very interested in having another community conversation about this topic. And so I just wanted to offer to the council and any staff or people in the audience here that I brought some reverse osmosis water today that was given to me by the water store, that the analytical analysis had no detection of fluoride in it. I'm going to pour it in this little pitcher, and if people want non-fluoridated water during the meeting, they're welcome to come up and use the pitcher and get some water.
Right.
And one more thing, water is life, and I really think it is the ultimate substance that we need to really strongly consider in our community of what is good for us, the common good, and what else can be done to help those in need of fluoride. So thank you for listening, and have some water.
If any other member of the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please come forward.
I would like to second what Joanne said, because I now drink water from the water store because of my concerns about fluoride and chlorine. And I think there are a lot of people, the more we learn, we should re-research this issue. I know I missed the meeting you had on this, but it might be useful to put it to public vote again. I think it may have changed. Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone else in the public would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please come forward.
Good evening. Buenas noches. I'm here scrambling to see if David Josiah Lawson was on the agenda, but then I just kind of was like, well, you all don't need to put on the agenda because we make sure that you do that. Here, I liked what the commissioner was saying about time. I don't have a lot of times, but it doesn't mean certain issues aren't important to me, and I see some serious safety concerns in this community. I don't trust cops because they haven't protected or supported the justice for Josiah. I haven't witnessed them supporting foster youth, haven't witnessed them helping homeless people, and I'm not going to digress, but there's some serious safety concerns in this community. I love all of my students. I think that's what you all don't understand. If that was your son that had been murdered, we would find a way to bring justice quicker, right? If that was your son, your nephew, your cousin. But people like Josiah, they don't look like me. I have light skin. I walk through the world with certain privileges. I'm aware of this, but I don't like it. It's a huge safety concern because I love all of my students, no matter what their skin color is. I'm a teacher. And I don't want someone to shoot one of my kids at a party one day and then the cops down the street from Mad River, they can't get there and save his life. The cops can't find anyone to arrest because they arrested all the students, and we even now have something closer to justice. We have DNA evidence on that knife, but that did not come from this county, and I'm tired of living here because I love this community, and I was told not to yell at you guys. But I'm yelling my love here, okay? Like, this is serious safety concerns. And I don't think you hear me, so I'm here again. I apologize. I don't always behave myself.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please come forward. Seeing no one, I will close early public comment. All right. Next is the consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and are enacted in one motion. There's no separate discussion of any of these items. If discussion is required, that item is removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. At the end of the reading of the consent calendar, council members or members of the public can request an item be removed for separate discussion. A, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of January 21st, 2020, 6 p.m. B, approve the minutes of the City Council meeting of February 5th, 2020. C, biweekly report and general warrants, on general warrants. D, adopt ordinance number 1523, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, pre-zoning the Creekside Homes annexation properties, waive reading of the text, consent to read by title only, and continue the public hearing to March 18th, 2020 to introduce the Development Agreement Ordinance 1524. E, adopt Ordinance 1525, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, amending the Arcata Municipal Code to make consumer price index adjustments to campaign contribution limitations, waive reading of the text and consent to read by title only. F, adopt Ordinance number 1528, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, designating the Chapman House as a historic landmark, waive reading of the text and consent to read by title only. G, adopt ordinance number 1529, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata, amending Article 9, stopping, standing, and parking, and Article 11, stopping, standing, or parking restricted or prohibited on certain streets, of Chapter 2, Traffic Regulations, Title 3, Public Safety of the Arcata Municipal Code, to revise time parking and parking meter zone regulations, waive reading of the text and consent to read by title only, and adopt resolution number 190-51, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Arcata designating streets subject to 4-hour time limits. H, approve city support to the 2020 Godwood Days Festival through the donated use of the Arcata Community Center and the city-approved banner locations. Require a refundable $500 damage/cleanup deposit and maintain a fee of $1,642.60 to cover staffing, equipment, and supply expenses incurred by the city solely as a result of hosting the event. I, approve a letter requesting the Housing Authority of the County of Humboldt establish a Section 8 preference for recipients of the city's tenant-based rental assistance program. And J, authorize the mayor to submit a letter to the National Endowment for the Arts in support of Playhouse Arts as the city's local arts agency. Would any member of the council like to remove an item?
I'd like to remove item F, and I'm going to abstain on H because Godwood Days is a client of mine.
Would any member of the public like to pull an item? And let's see, and then I will.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar minus items F and 8. Just F? Okay, minus item F.
Second.
And I am recusing myself on item D since I do work for Danco, who's the developer for that project.
We have a motion.
All right, so you pulled item F?
No, he pulled item F,
you pulled-
and, but
All right.
we
All right.
have a motion and a second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And
Yeah.
item F?
You know, when this discussion happened at the last council meeting, I know staff, there were, brought up as described by staff, an option number 9 that gave some discretion to staff over, I wrote this down, to determine similar or like uses. And it was something that, I wasn't comfortable with, and I believe Mayor Winkler had also expressed that. And, then we took public comment and more conversation happened about it. And then the motion was made, and because there was no further discussion on it, I felt like it was reasonable of me to presume that it was not going to be included in the motion. And so it's, I apologize, but I missed it, that it was included in the motion. And so I would like to reintroduce it minus, number 9 as described by staff.
So that's going to be on page 61. It's in the appendix, I think 2 or B associated with that item. There's a top listing, and it would just be removal of number 9. And just so the council knows, we had this discussion at the last meeting. It does not affect this project and its current request before you. This was an item staff just offered if you wanted to add, because you did end up asking for and adding similar language when we had a similar item on the Peace House. But removing this or keeping it in does not materially affect this project either way.
Right, that would require a second?
Yes.
So would I make a motion? Okay. That is to reintroduce it? Okay. So I will move to reintroduce it with the amended language.
I'm trying to figure out really what we're doing. So other similar and compatible uses, so that's, you don't feel comfortable with that? You feel like it's too loose? Is that what your point is?
I just don't see the need. I mean, we've already added a bunch of extra uses to it, and we can't even identify what these would be. So it's just kind of like, I don't really see the need. And I mean, specifically, I prefer that the council retains that authority to make those decisions. It's just, I just don't feel it's necessary. And I know the Peace House, to me, that it seemed like it was taking a long time. They were frustrated with the process, and it was something that, at that time that was recognized that could expedite it. So, I kind of felt like that was a unique situation.
Okay, I guess I don't really have a feeling about it either way, so.
And do you still feel the same, Mayor Winkler? Have you changed your opinion on it?
No, I agree with you on this, but I think it's, as the mayor, I'm not going to second it.
Yeah.
I would
can if you want to. You are absolutely able to.
Yes,
yeah. Cool.
Well, I mean, I guess I'll second it, because I kind of appreciate your thought that the council gets to maintain.
I really appreciate
I also
that.
like to have some, flexibility for staff to be able to make movement with things, but, I just don't think there's a big issue.
Cool. Thank you. So when we say as amended, that means we're removing.
The number 9.
You would be removing number 9.
Okay.
Yes.
And then
Conditions of approval.
Okay.
And then it will be coming back for adoption at your following meeting. As amended, you'll see that language at that adoption meeting.
Okay.
So if there aren't any other comments from council, now I'll open this up to the public. So if any member would like to comment on item F or the motion as amended, please come forward. I'll make that 3 minutes.
I came at the last meeting, and actually I supported that, maintaining number 9, item number 9. One thing is our general plan is out of compliance, And so there, and I worked with somebody about a year ago, or maybe it was 2 now, with a building that they had that was on listed within the city. And because our general plan wouldn't allow them to do the use they wanted to, maybe our new general plan will, I think you have to have some flexibility where you can actually do that. Eventually, we were able to figure out how to make it work, going through many, many loops, and we got it approved. And since then, she's been able to buy the house, and it's a young businesswoman, and she's part of our community. But I think it's really important to have flexibility, and I know Councilmember Watson has issues with that, but I really truly believe we have historic structures in our community. They take a lot to take care of and maintain. We may not have a use that you would approve at this time, but we don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years and the next 3 years. The uses change constantly. And of course, I'm an older citizen of Arcata, and the younger citizens of Arcata have many ideas of things that can happen and are happening within our society and our world. And I think that flexibility is needed in order to maintain and protect our historic structures, which I've worked on since 1972, trying to preserve them. And I brought Sam Panisi along. He's a former city council member, and he has the Lady Anne. And I thought it would be good for him to come to a council meeting because he hasn't been at one in years. And probably really not, I mean years. I'm here all the time. But I would like to say that maybe Sam would like to address this from the Lady Anne and other historic properties he has. But that's my feeling. Give us some flexibility, please.
Thank you.
Sam Panisi, 902 14th Street. Thanks for the opportunity. I guess my issue as the owner of a historic building is it's very, very time-consuming to get anything done with them. If staff can somehow occasionally have a list of things that they can be creative about and approve, that could probably save time. Time is money. Old houses sometimes need things more quickly than new houses. The other thing is, if it's going to be up to the council, it's going to take a long time. We're going to probably be going through the Planning Commission then, and get to you. I don't know how this would be set up, but when you consider this, please think about how difficult it is with historic homes, and sometimes how fast we need to move on some things to get repairs done and other things. So just keep that in mind when you deal with these. Thank you.
Thank you. If any other member of the public would like to comment on this item, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close public comment and take it back to council.
So yeah, I definitely appreciate your comments. Thank you. And with this, the way I'm looking at it is we had this discussion, then we took public comment. The project applicant came up. He did not express an interest in this option as the applicant and the owner of the property. And it wasn't in the staff report. So I just, again, I don't feel like it's necessary. If the project applicant had expressed an interest in it, the person who owns the property, maybe I would have a different feeling about it. But yeah, right now that's just how I feel. To me, it's about the precedent. It's not about historic buildings or, trying to, make an applicant go through a lot of extra work or cost. It's just a precedent of power getting delegated to staff, and sometimes I think it's appropriate, sometimes I disagree. So this is just an instance where I just don't see it being necessary.
So there, council comments?
Well, yeah, I have a comment because I seconded this, and so we were moving this this whole ordinance forward. Truly, I agree with the building owners. So I agree with giving staff a little more flexibility. I think it's the healthier way to deal with things. So I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to vote now.
Your second.
You're going to vote?
So I will just withdraw my motion.
Okay, I was going to say your second does not obligate you to vote one way or the other.
I get that, but I didn't want to vote against the whole thing just because of one little line. But anyway, that was a question I had. But so you're not trying to rescind number 9 anymore?
Well, if I would like to rescind it, but I also don't want to end up in a 2-2 vote and then this gets held up. because that's what would happen if you decided that you didn't agree. So,
How's that?
I wasn't sure how.
If it's a 2-2
Councilmember
vote,
Patino.
you're bringing it back, it's dissolved, and our action holds from the last meeting.
If it's a 2-2 vote, that particular motion fails. Somebody would then need to make a motion to adopt it, and we would see what that vote is. I mean, those are the two options.
Okay.
yeah. And so if that's going to be the case, then there's no need to even vote on it. I can just withdraw my motion.
Withdrawing the motion is final, so that's your prerogative, certainly.
That's okay, either way, whatever.
Well,
wasn't
the
sure.
original motion is not on the table right now. We take, my understanding is the original motion is not, as in F, is not on the table right now.
There is only one motion. There was no original motion because it was taken off the consent
Right,
calendar.
okay.
So the only motion on the table is the motion to introduce with the amended language, with the
Which-
removal of item 9.
Which Councilmember Watson has now withdrawn.
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1528, ordinance of the City Council of the City of Arcata designating the Chapman House as a historic landmark, waive reading of the text, and consent to read by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right? Right. Next is old business. A receive a report on the public opinion polling results for city-sponsored ballot measure for open space, parks, and trails. And can I have a staff report, please?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Tonight, we are recommending that the council receive a report on a public opinion poll done for a city-sponsored ballot measure for parks, open spaces, and trails. Provide direction to staff. You know, we've identified 3 decision points specifically you want to make sure we get your opinions on, and of course, anything else and questions you have along the way. And lastly, to authorize staff to develop a draft ballot measure to bring back to you in March. And we'd be working closely with the city attorney, Nancy Diamond, to craft that. We have a draft. We've been considering this for a few years now. It's not a new thing, as you know. We've just been kind of waiting for the timing, the appropriate timing, which is not always easy. And I must say, this is for the November general election, 2020. That's the intention. So we've had Measure G and Measure Z and other measures come and go. We've not really wanted to compete with those. So that's kind of, we think this is a good time. So we hired a firm called FM3 Research, highly recommended by Trust for Public Land, to do our public opinion polling. And tonight I have a taped presentation from them due to our lag time with our webcast. We couldn't do it live, but it's 18 minutes. Miranda Everett from FM3 Research will then be available on the phone, that will be live, to answer any questions that staff can't. So really, what is polling is a tool. It's just to gauge, what if there's support for a ballot measure like this, and in this case, a parcel tax, and just to see if it's viable to go forward. The polling so far does show, and I don't want to talk too much about it yet, but that with a 72% affirmative support, there's reason to say, let's go forward. There's some nuances and caveats we must talk about there, but a parcel tax is a property-related tax, and it requires 2/3 vote, as you know. That would be 66.67% to be precise to pass. In terms of models, we've looked at a lot of other cities, successful ballot measures that accomplished similar goals around the state. Most recently, Albany, California, some other East Bay communities, some from Southern California, just to learn from successes as well as some that didn't make it, some lessons learned there. So we'll be bringing back a ballot measure that's informed by the polling. It's also informed by, what we've learned from talking to other communities. What's the purpose and need here? This is not, it's a modest ballot measure, whether it's $40, $25, or $35 in terms of the tax generates a modest amount of revenue for the city, but many times a modest amount would go a long ways towards leveraging other grants, leveraging other funding sources we might have, whether they're general fund, whether they're park and lieu fees that we collect, residential construction taxes, things like that. So it's important, I think, to have a steady source so that we don't count on just episodic revenue streams that are hard to predict. This could lessen the need at times, not replace, but at times for revenue from timber harvesting in some cases to accomplish some of the goals that we're looking for here. So it gives the city a lot of flexibility. I have a lot to say at the end, but right now I just want to fire up the presentation which describes the process of the polling. I think some interesting things we've learned here about the community. This was done in January. To be exact, I believe it was mid-January. It's in the presentation, so let me make sure I hit the right one. It's this one here. And let this 18 minutes.
This is Miranda Everett from Fairbanks, Maslin, Mullen, Metro & Associates, and I am presenting results from a recent survey of Arcata voters on a potential parks measure. So the results here are the results of 246 interviews with voters likely to participate in the November 2020 election within the city. This was conducted last month between January 13th and the 20th. Voters have the option of taking the survey online through an email invitation or by phone. And we got a mix of landline and cell phone numbers for that one. This gives us a margin of sampling error of 6.3% at the 95% confidence level. And if you see anything that adds up to 99 or 101, that is rounding. So we'll start with big picture issue context. Right now, the majority of voters in the city feel things are headed in the right direction. I'd say in my work across the country, especially here on the West Coast, these numbers are quite enviable. Many cities are seeing this number kind of upside down, where the right direction is in the 30s and wrong track in the 50s. So to have a population that feels fairly optimistic about things at the local level is a good place to start. More specifically, more than 7 in 10 say they have a positive impression of the Parks Division. Fully 72% have a favorable opinion. 44% have a very favorable opinion of that group, even as their views of the city and county are more muted. Overall, those are positive. You have majorities who have a favorable opinion, although that very favorable, that dark green bar, is much smaller for those two groups. I think that's pretty common when we see folks offering their impressions if things are generally going well, but they haven't heard anything specifically that's either good or bad. They're much more likely to be in that somewhat favorable category. So to see the contrast between the Parks and Recreation Division, where there's a lot of specific affection for them, versus the more general and broad favorability of the city and county government is a key point for us as well. Usership of the city of Arcata Park, recreation area, and trails is quite high. 21% told us they use them almost every day. Fully half that they're at least going several times a week. And almost everybody, 80% or higher, say they go several times a month. So lots of folks, as you may know from using those areas yourself, use these resources quite frequently and have a personal relationship with them. So stepping back a little bit, we did ask voters whether they have an impression of a need for funding in the city of Arcata for parks and natural areas, and then to tell us how intense that need is. Fully 61% said there's at least some need for new funding for the city's parks and natural areas. 22% called that a great need.
And 19% said they don't know either way. I think this is another key finding we'll come back to again and again, that it really is kind of a need for education and information for folks. They may feel like what we have is fairly good, in good condition, they use it quite frequently. It's not something that might need more investment, but they're not, a lot of them are not saying no real need or just a little need. They're in that some or not sure category. They're really getting some specifics about the project and things that would be done with the funding is going to be really important. So, turning to voter reactions to a ballot measure. We tested a 75-word ballot measure here. There were two versions. One had the sunset of 20 years, and one used the phrase until ended by voters. Wanted to see if there was a difference there in the length of time that the measure would be in place. But the thing that everyone else either read or heard, depending on whether they did it by phone or online, was to protect natural areas for future generations by improving parks, open spaces, trails, protecting land around creeks, rivers, and streams to prevent pollution, improve water quality, preserving redwood forests, wildlife habitat, scenic hillsides, agricultural land, expanding public access, trail systems, and then mentions the amount of the tax, how much it would raise annually, and some oversight provisions. The first half of that, the amount, the duration, and how much it would raise, those are required to be included by state law. The other pieces are reassuring voters and kind of making a promise to voters that there is accountability. And what we saw is that 7 in 10 voters initially support the measure. There's no real difference in reactions based on the tax duration, whether it's for 20 years or until ended by voters. We have support for more than 7 in 10, and the intensity doesn't really differ either. Now, given that the overall margin needs for passage, you need 66.7%, you need 2/3 votes. And with our margin of error on the survey, this is a positive result, but one that we need to have a little bit of caution around. I think we talked earlier about the need for funding and perception there, really softening, or really intensifying that soft yes vote, the probably, and undecided yes vote, and those undecided voters more generally in the gray at the bottom is going to be really key to making sure we get 2/3 on a measure should we choose to take it to the ballot. So by some major demographic groups, you'll see here in green at the bottom the percentage of sample in parentheses. It can be useful to look at the demographics, but also keep in mind how much of your voter population each of these aspects make up. So 4 in 5 women support the parks measure, as do 2/3 of men. Very common pattern we see when they're often more supportive of finance measures for local issues, especially ones having to do with the environment. By age, there is more than 2/3 support among voters under 50 in each of those categories, and between 65 and 74. There's really more ambivalence among voters 50 to 64 and those 75 plus. Majority is there, but slim ones and short of the 2/3 needed. As we typically see, voters under 30 are a really strong base of support for a measure like this. They are a significant portion of the Arcata likely voter turnout, and especially with what's on the agenda for the November election, I think this would be a particularly good time to ensure they have this measure on their ballot. So I think that's a good sign there to really see that you've got strong support from those voters who are likely to turn out in this election and maybe not the future one. By party, we see more than 7 in 10 Democrats and independents support the measure. Nearly 80% there was Democrats, who make up almost 60% of your overall likely voter turnout there. Pretty strong opposition from Republicans, but as noted there, they're just 8% of the electorate. So small group, one typically opposed to measures like this. It's really going to be about making sure the message gets out to the Democrats and independents should you decide to move forward with this one. And then looking at support for a measure by that need for funding question. So fully 90% of those who said there's at least some need for funding say they're willing to support a measure. That 20% who said there's a little need or there's no real need for funding are much more likely to be opposed. Fully 77% of them said they would vote no on a measure. And then that 1 in 5 who said they don't know either way, they need some more information about what the funding would go to. They don't really have a sense of either of the parts. Division really needs more support in this way. 2/3 support the measure, and 11% are not sure of how they would vote. So that's another kind of key place to look and kind of underscores, in fact, the argument to provide some more information and context to voters. And then just looking quickly at usage of parks and recreation areas and trails and how that correlates to voter support. Essentially, those who know you best, those who go at least weekly, and that's 51% of your likely voters here, are really likely to support a measure. So those who know you best are probably more likely to understand the needs, really value the work that you're already doing, and to trust you moving forward. We also asked folks to tell us in a few words of their own why they would vote yes and no. Starting with the yes vote, there were some really general answers here. Lots of folks said the environment's really important. We need to protect the environment. Part of our quality of life in the city is all about the environment. As we move down the list, there are things that are more specific, talking about, $40 is too much per year. Public places like parks are really underfunded more generally. But really broadly speaking, the reasons people are voting yes have to do with their affection for the environment. Here are a few quotes from supporters to kind of illustrate that point. And then on the opponent side of the coin, most of them just oppose taxes more generally. 47% said they believe taxes are too high, or there are too many taxes in California or in Arcata more specifically. Relatively few are talking about managing the budget or leadership or things like that. It really comes down to just this sense of being overtaxed, which we see as pretty much always the case on local measures like this one. Here are a few rationales from folks. Next, we wanted to see if the overall price tag had some influence on support for the measure overall. We saw that the yes vote doesn't really change, especially given our margin of error. It's all around 7 and 10 total yes support there. But the intensity of support does increase for lower parcel tax rates. So at $25 a year, we get strong support as high as 50%. I will note that this is a little bit of an artificial exercise. We start by telling folks all the nice things they can get for $40 and then say, okay, for about half as much, for $25, you could essentially get the same sort of thing, not putting such a fine point on it, but saying, what if the measure were instead for $25? And there, I think, naturally, plenty of people will say, well, you started at $40, now you gave me a discount. When they get their ballot, they're not going to be subject to that sort of process. They're just going to see a number. So I think that overall yes vote is a good indication for us that there's not a broad rejection of the $40 figure. But if we are, and in this case, I think we are looking at hitting that 2/3 benchmark, it may be something to consider whether a lower overall amount might be worth the additional potential certainty on the intensity of the yes vote. And that's something that, should you decide to go forward, we would be definitely testing in a follow-up survey, should we do one. So turning to priorities for the measure, we asked folks to tell us how important a list of specific projects might be to them. Extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not too important. And what we can see, there's several slides in this series, but on the first one here, we kind of have an embarrassment of riches. Plenty of things here are important to just about everybody. Taken together to start showing extremely and very important group. 90% that protecting creeks or salmon and seals have lived are either extremely or very important to them. 55% calling that extremely important to them. A lot of intensity as well around protecting land around creeks, rivers, and streams to prevent pollution. 52% calling that extremely important. 53% saying preserving wildlife habitat is extremely important. And intensity as well around redwood forests and natural areas for future generations. So I think what we can take away from this slide is that the things that are most vital to folks, the things they value the most, are the outcomes. The things like the fish and wildlife habitat, the redwood forest, the areas for future generations, those kinds of outcomes are the things that people are really intensely passionate about in the city. Moving down just a bit, these things are ranging from 3/4 calling them extremely very important to just over half. So a broader spread here. The things at kind of the top of the list here have to do with streams again and removing carbon pollution from the air with trees and plants. Those ones are pretty meaningful, especially the carbon and the climate change connection. I think with so many younger voters in your electorate, that's something that really resonates. Maintaining the city's open forest is also broadly popular, green space, environmental education, and then right around 2/3 or lower are things like citizens oversight, which, as we mentioned, is something that's typically a part of these measures, but is something we might want to draw voters' attention to. It's especially important in places with more conservative voters. Here, I think folks are much more focused on the outcomes of the measure, like the clean air and water and forests and things like that, than they are about the accountability pieces, but it's always really important to include those as well. Like trails, walking trails, and playgrounds are lower down on the list. I would say not surprised by this result, just about any place we pull, these kinds of outdoor and active recreation pieces, while they are very important to lots of people, including myself, in a personal way, and especially a place where so many people use your services so often, it is something that's seen as a relative nice to have. They'd rather see, salmon protected and redwoods protected into the future for future generations than a trail if they had to choose. And then paging down the list a bit more, the things that are important to narrow majorities. But if you add up that somewhat important, it's not that they're not unimportant to lots of folks. It's just when we're picking and choosing and trying to get to 2/3, these are things that maybe are not as broadly emphasized, although they are compelling with certain subgroups, of course. These, again, have to do with trails, agriculture, scenic hillsides, anything that having to do with expansion is in this lower tier. And I think that, again, comes back to people want to hear about the outcome. The outcome is protecting wetland habitat or protecting land for future generations. They don't really care how it's done, whether it's easements or purchasing land or however it's actually functionally done. Doesn't matter to them nearly as much as knowing that that land is going to be protected into the future. And we see this on the left side of this series as well. So messaging and movement, we'll turn to that. So to get this a really thorough test, one thing we wanted to do after that initial vote and hearing more about voter priorities was hear from them with some support messages, and then provide some of that more information and see how much that moved voters. It did increase intensity by 10 points, as we see, are definitely at went from 37% initially to 47% after support messaging. And then after a brief opposition message, we did see support slide down a bit to 61%. I think this finding is pretty significant. We do see that providing more information and context to voters is really compelling, really helps sew up that 2/3 figure and give us a little room to breathe there. But a critique is pretty powerful as well. Folks are not so dug into their opinion once they're supporters that they wouldn't be willing to move once they hear a little bit more about it. Notably, there is no statistical difference in the yes and no vote for the half simple. Even though the opposition side, for the half that heard until ended by voters, heard an opposition message that was very specific and called it a forever tax and really drew attention to that aspect, that didn't really make a difference in the overall scheme of things. So, turn to conclusion. We do believe a measure funding parks and natural areas in Arcata could be valuable for the November 2020 ballot with a strong positive campaign of information and very limited formal opposition. The measure begins with support from more than 7 in 10 within the margin of error of the 2/3 needed. That's an important caution there. And that support is relatively soft. So while we have something that kind of meets that benchmark of yes, potential move forward, we see it as kind of a yellow light rather than a green light. But we do think there's a lot of good information in the survey that helps chart a path forward. Lower parcel tax amount increases the intensity of support. That might be a place to look. We definitely saw the things that people intensely value, like protecting water quality, preserving wildlife habitats, naming some of those iconic species. Those are really meaningful. And it's possible that by rewriting the ballot measure question to really focus on those priorities, and putting them more center stage alongside things like trails, we could really solidify that yes vote. knowing again, once again, come to again and again, is that 3 and 5 see at least some need for funding for parks and natural areas, and that group is much more likely to support a measure. So getting that 20% or so who don't know enough about need for funding to say either way, to understand what the need for funding is has some real potential to help build support. So that is the end of my presentation here, and hopefully we can work out the kinks and get to questions.
Paul?
I don't have any questions.
Yeah, I don't have any questions right now either.
A question that I have is comparison with other similar-sized jurisdictions in rural areas like Humboldt County, and what has been successful in campaigns that they've used. And could you talk some more about that, please?
I'm trying to recall a similar measure in Humboldt County in recent times. I'm not sure that I can recall one. I mean, Arcata had a parklands bond in 1979. That's been a long time. That passed by less than 2/3, but that was pre-Prop 218, so it passed, and that's been implemented. You know, Miranda, they're in LA, Los Angeles area, so she stayed late so she could be available for questions. I think Karen's dialing her up on this one right now, but I think they're familiar with more statewide comparable ones. So we have been tracking those too. I think from other areas, one of the key things, and we plan to have that in this one too, is the accountability, you know, for a special fund where it goes and an annual report, although not just within your budget process, but of where the money is going for. Is it maintenance, which, you know, quality and safety is an important thing. We want to make sure we take care of what we have, and that would be allowable with this, as well as, you know, implementing a new project or an additional project. One thing I didn't hit on early, and I think you know it though, the way this is designed is that it's for all registered voters, not just property owners. So that's an important part.
It affects just the properties.
It affects just, yeah, and it's a flat fee.
Yeah, parcel tax.
For a parcel, if it's, you know, half acre or a quarter acre or 10 acres, it's not scalable. It's just a flat parcel tax.
All right, so Mayor, I think your question was, you know, comparing this measure to communities of similar size. And so we do have Miranda Everett on a call right now, and she could certainly speak to that if you'd like to know their experience of seeing our results versus measures in communities of similar size. Were you interested in that?
Yes.
Okay. Miranda, let's give it a try.
Okay. Thanks for your patience with the technical hurdles here. I have to get on a plane this evening to my sister's wedding, so I appreciate the flexibility. So to answer the question about the community size, so I would say that these results look pretty favorable. We had a really robust sample, so the thing that's most important here is kind of our internal margin of error. But in other communities, similar size to yours, I think this is looking fairly positive. Some of the other things that are important in addition to size are the demographics. You have a relatively young electorate that's going to be turning out in November, and that's something that's not as common in small communities, and I think a great benefit because those folks are really clearly connected to and value the parks and natural areas in the city, and they're also more likely to generally be supporters of measures like these.
Thank you. So if there aren't any other questions from council at this time, I'm going to open this up to public comment. So if any member of the public, would like to comment on this item, please come forward.
I try to get Sam up here again. Because we were involved in this issue about when when the ballot measure happened, and there was a bond that was placed for the community center complex, all that property down there includes the Phillips House Museum, etc. And the way to pay that off was by logging the Arcata forest. I know that sort of got to the Forestry Committee because they just didn't want to see it logged specifically to pay off that bond. And I think it's really time that we think about having this kind of a issue go onto the ballot. We have so many parklands. We've done a really good job in managing them. Your deputy has done a fantastic job in trying to figure out different ways to increase the Arcata forest, and he's worked really hard at that. And your city manager left, but she did a good job on working on, the marsh and the whole McDaniel Slough and all of those things, and they all cost money to do, and figuring out grants, etc. And we're really pristine in our number of parks, and I would like to see this move forward and have you consider putting it on the ballot. And that's why Sam came with me, because we both feel like it's really important. And he was on the Arcata City Council. I went off the council in '79. But he was still on the council. Thank you.
Alex was my mayor. Can you imagine that? Thanks for letting me comment on this. This is an odd issue for me. I am generally not one who likes funding by proposition. This is a little different thing, in my opinion. It's because it's a very modest amount of money that we're talking about. But it does one very special thing, and that gives the council, which is, as you well know, every budget year you're met with certain demands that sometimes you can't even predict until that time comes to set your budget. This would allow that steady stream to come in that's so important for getting other grants and things. And I think about not just my grandchildren. My fourth one is 9 months old, and I'd really like her to have the same level of quality that I have in the parks in this area, and I think most of us would feel that way. But then there's the issue that we can't predict right now, the issue of climate change and how that's going to affect things. This gives us a basic tool, as I believe will happen. There will be government funds that are going to be starting to happen because of trying to either protect, move, or in some other way deal with the impacts of climate change. We live right on the coast. We know this is going to happen. It is happening, in fact, as I'm speaking. So it's such a modest thing that can give us that annual for sure. And I guess the last thing I would say is this would give an opportunity for the people of Arcata to decide if this was something they wanted to take on. That's important to me. It takes it off your shoulders. We had various votes in, what was it, 81? Was it 81? That was a long time ago. But the amount of community support we had for that made our decision very easy on how to proceed with that, and that was critical at that time. So I guess my urge would be consider doing this. It would be good for our parks. It would take a little of the pressure off of that annual budgeting process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi again. As an almost daily user of the forest, and we moved here because of the incredible environment we enjoy, and the clean air, and the ocean, and the incredible people. We want to make sure, and I don't think anybody minds contributing to maintaining these assets. From year to year, we never know how the market's going to be for redwood, and it can be extremely variable, which means that the amount that has to be cut or can be sold can be very variable, and we don't want to have to do what happened years ago with having to make such major cuts. So I think we really should go for it. I'd be tempted to go for the higher amount, perhaps, rather than the lower amount, because I think that support is there in the community. But you could always go for something in between, like 30 or 35, because you've gotten the options of 25 and 40, right? But I think it would be really a valuable thing to do, take the pressure off the budget and allow people who love this place to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. So any other member of the public who would like to speak on this, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Emily. I support this. I think that the fact that it's a parcel tax is of a benefit to this, to presenting this to the public, because usually people who own property have the ability to contribute this amount of money to the betterment of the entire community. So I support this. Thanks.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to come out on this, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close public comment and take it back to council.
I'm ready to make a motion to authorize staff to create this language.
Do we want to have a little bit of a discussion about the potential decision points, or?
Yeah, that would be important, I think, for us to.
Well, be part of the motion, no?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
My only thought on that is some part of me, I mean, I like the 40, but I also had experience, selling strawberries for 99 cents a basket, and then when we raised it to $1, that was way too much. So there's definitely a psychological element to this stuff. So some part of me thinks $35 is sort of like 25 in your brain, and 40 is a little more. But that's just a kind of a visceral response I have to it. But I could go either way. So I just wanted to say that because I do recognize somehow 35 feels less. So on that's where I'm there. And then tax duration, I think we should go with a no ending, because it seems it didn't matter. And, why end it when it's working? And they're still going to need maintenance and stuff all the time. So that makes sense to me there. And I don't know, no exemptions. Because I don't think it's that much money. So, I mean, whatever we put on there. But like I said, if we're kind of worried that we're teeter-tottering on the 62% to the 55% type of thing, that's where I might go with that kind of psychological thought of that 35 is less. But anyway.
Yeah, I like the idea of going for 40 and having the 20-year limit. I think the unlimited is in my mind, is the biggest question. When a voter goes to vote, they say, oh, parcel tax, 20-year duration. Well, okay. No end. I think that's a harder thing to pass. But so for me, I'd like to see it be $40 in 20 years, or even 25.
Just hearing about how many people love our one, I agree with the $40 per parcel. On the tax duration, I would lean towards no stated ending term. The results of the study that we paid for do say there was no significant reaction, whether or not, from the people they polled, whether or not it was a 20-year or a stated ending term. So to me, I'm interpreting that to where it wasn't going to impact the voters' decision by their determination. And yeah, I don't have any thoughts on the exemption.
Well, the statistics showed no significant impact from the duration, so I don't think that we need to have a specific duration, rather just having voters can repeal it. And I would be more inclined to 30. I think that 30 is more the intermediate number. 35 feels like a larger amount, although I'd be happy to pay it personally. And so I think that erring on the side of lower, making it more likely that it would pass, is more important to me than the additional money that would come in for the difference between 30 and 35 or 30 and 40.
I calculated, and maybe you guys did too, that every $5 increment is worth about $25,000 to us in a year.
About 30, yeah, you're right. Close.
Well, so can I put forward that we maybe put $35, since that happens to be between 30 and 40, and...
I think Brett was in the middle of making a motion before we, were you?
Right, we needed to figure this out.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. That's what I would, that's kind of what I said before, though, so, but I'd say $35 for, start it there, and then no end time.
What about exemptions or not exemptions?
I don't feel that we need to do exemptions. This is like property taxes, it just comes like, twice a year, and just divide it up, and, that's the way I see this.
So I just wanted to hear again, why do you believe the 35 versus 40? Because it's, you just feel like yeah.
Well, because I had an experience where we were selling strawberries for 99 cents a basket. Everyone thought it was a great price. Oh, it's 99 cents, that's great, This is going back 30 years ago. But anyway, and then when we raised it to $1, we had people storming out, yelling at us, it's too expensive, what are we doing? And we were sitting there going, really? We're talking about a penny, but so it really hit us. Why the 99.99? It's just psychologically helps.
So you want 39?
$39.99.
How about
39? Yeah.
How about $34.99?
$34.99. Sure, something like that. I mean, and then for me, I'm happy to go with $34.99 if you want, but I would say 35 somehow, I don't know, viscerally for me, it feels like 25. Doesn't feel any different. It just feels, that's how it feels to me. 40 feels like, oh, it's a little more. Anyway, so I know it's kind of silly, but again, the 99 cents on a dollar was silly too, and yet people viscerally felt it. So, I don't know. But I mean, I could be talked into 40s. I don't think any of this is that much money, but this would this be tied to the index, the consumer price index? Would it have something along those lines?
If you directed it that way, we could write it that way, but we...
Well, I mean, that almost seems a little high, because that can really start, taking things up, but anyway, seems like it should have some adjustment, particularly if we have no end date, we should adjust it every 10 years to...
I think putting that CPI in there is mixing it up.
It might mix it up.
Used to looking at a parcel tax that's got CPI on it. That just, I don't know. I don't know that I've seen one.
Right, so if we set it, is that what it's set at? Do we have to come back to the council, or do people have to vote again for it to go up?
If you wanted to raise it in any way that wasn't in the initial ballot, it would need to go back to the voters. So, and I think they're mixed. I think we certainly do see parcel tax and sales tax ballot measures that have not so much sales tax, because that goes up, with the cost of living anyway.
I mean, do we have one? We don't have one like that, which got a CPI on it.
We don't, no.
The polling also...
But I've certainly seen other communities that do, even on like utility users tax.
I guess putting CPI on it and having no end seem like a definite conflict in my logic brain.
Yeah, so many of the measures are percent related, right? And so then it's just built into the cost that way. This being a flat fee would not have any escalation over time, if you had no end date.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, you could build in something that's half of the CPI, if you felt like that was just more palatable.
It almost makes me feel like having an end date makes some sense, just because we may want to revisit it. And so then it would be sort of like when we redo our utility users tax, we kind of have to talk about it again in public, and we could go, okay, this was great. We just did something great, 35 for 15, 20 years or whatever we decide, and maybe we'd have a conversation about it again, and we could maybe make it 50 or 60 or something then, depending on how money is.
Well, I guess my recommendation would be if the goal of the end date is just to kind of force that conversation, I mean, that conversation can certainly happen, and I've seen plenty of communities that have an existing tax and go back to the voters to say, this is not a new tax, it's just a small increment, and I think that tends to make it an easier sell. Yeah, similar to what the fire department is doing right now, retiring one for a new.
Julie, did you have something you were trying to...
I just wanted to note that the polling didn't ask about a CPI. So the polling was really about a flat fee, just as you're talking, just to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of aberrant enough that it might just throw people off, so I kind of get that.
So I'd be okay with 35. And then looking at the exemptions, now I would say no exemptions after thinking about it a little more.
How about the time, length of time?
Oh, yeah, and then, like we talked about, no stated ending term.
Okay.
So you
Okay,
made
so moved?
Sure.
What he said?
That's fine. Yeah.
Is that okay?
Was that a second?
So
Second.
we moved to
Yeah.
make it for
Well, I didn't actually make a
$35
motion, yeah, so
for
that's all right.
no
That's totally
ending
fine.
time and no
Just made a
exemptions.
And you Okay. We have a motion and a second, and why don't you restate the motion?
Okay, the motion is that we want to move this parcel tax forward at $35 a year per parcel with no ending date and no exemptions.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and just so the council knows, this will be coming back to you in its final form, so.
Yeah.
if you
Well, I feel like the timing is really right,
opportunity.
particularly with the presidential election coming up. Maybe a lot of young voters will get excited,
All right.
hopefully. I mean, this is projecting, but, and that may carry this forward.
We are going to take a 5-minute break now. We are resuming this city council meeting, and next is new business. Receive and accept the Plaza Improvement Task Force report and provide direction. Could I have a staff report, please?
Hello, Mayor and Council. The Plaza Improvement Task Force, as you know, was implemented by yourselves back in October of 2018. Okay. And since then, they've worked very hard and have produced this report, and we have a number of members of the task force here today, as well as Jane McGuire, who is our chair, and we have a slideshow that will really go over kind of their process and also the recommendations that they are making to you, which is all in your staff report. But rather than go through that twice, I figured I would really turn it over to Jane and let her give her presentation, and then certainly staff are here, as well as Jane and other members of the task force, if there are questions or more discussion afterwards.
Thank you. As Julie said, I am Jane McGuire, and I had the honor and privilege of serving as the chair for this Plaza Improvement Task Force. Thank you for the opportunity to let us come and share this information. I want to point out that there are 5 members, including myself, here, and I'd love it if you guys would stand up and introduce yourselves. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm Erica Gray.
I'm Daniel Bixler.
Moonlight McCumber. Jane Woodward.
Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and being supportive. So our recommendations that we're going to be making are both intended to be short-term and long-term actionable solutions directed at bringing about critical shift on the plaza. So as Julie just mentioned, our Plaza Improvement Task Force was convened following a 2018 Plaza study session that was held at the D Street Neighborhood Center. And following that meeting, the task force was convened with the idea being, or the direction from the City Council being, for us to make some recommendations on projects and programs that could improve the Plaza neighborhood, with a specific focus on general safety, economic development, infrastructure improvements, beautification, and increase to the plaza-based community activities, with the overall goal of being to create a critical shift to ensure that the plaza becomes a welcoming gathering place, free from verbal harassment, racial symbols, drug dealing, alcohol-related incidents, aggressive dogs, and vandalism. That was sent to us as we started our mission. Oops, sorry, wrong direction. Here's a list of our committee members. You'll see that we have 3 at-large members: Dan Bixler, Erica Gray, and not here with us tonight is Erica Hughes. Then we have 4 people on the committee who are representing city committees, and so we were appointees. And so we have Jane Woodward, who you've seen from today a couple of times, myself, and then Angeli Browning and Moonlight McCumber, who's here also, and then Molly Steele, who's with the City of Arcata, with the Arcata Chamber of Commerce, and then Jeff Nosh, who replaced Jeanette Todd with the Arcata Main Street. Which way am I going? Okay. So we began our process 15 months ago, and during the 15 months, we've gathered a lot of information from a lot of different sources. We reviewed previous feedback from other plaza from other reports that had been done on the plaza, dating all the way back to 1994. We considered recommendations from the Public Safety Task Force report of 2018, and also we looked at results from the business survey conducted by the Arcata Main Street, the Chamber, and Council Member Watson in 2017. On top of that, we created a survey and participated in extensive public engagement with this survey to various community groups to ensure that all community members and stakeholders had an opportunity to add their voice to this process. I'll talk more about that survey in a minute. We also reached out to current event organizers, as well as to several numerous community members, local experts, and then some of the city's committees, including economic development, transportation, and transportation safety, and parks and recreation. So we gathered information from many, 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 many sources. I keep going backwards. So with regard to the survey that we created, I want to first say a couple of things about the survey because I thought it was a really a thorough effort that we put out. The survey was created both in English and in Spanish. It was delivered electronically and on paper, and it was dispersed on paper as well as given as an oral interview. So we had people gathering information on the plaza on several different occasions, including the farmers market, asking passerbys for their information. In total, we received 860 responses. And that outreach, we received 860 responses from people who were associated with businesses, families with young children, HSU students, Spanish-speaking communities, as well as various other community groups. With this wealth of information, we were fortunate to be able to find a couple of graduate students from the public sociology program who were then able to help us compile and analyze the data. So I want to give thanks to Kelly Wickerson and Tracy Weinert, whose efforts certainly helped us with this because it was a lot of data. And the results are all in your packet, so you can look through and see the results in great detail. A couple things I'd like to highlight from the results, though, is that on the question of what are people's vision for the plaza, the comments focused on making it a gathering place for community, as well as having it be family-friendly and a safer place. Then when we asked about what aspects of the plaza are working well, the responses went on to say that included community events and festivals, landscaping, and groundskeeping were some of the highlights of what was indicated there. And then when we asked about what wasn't working well on the plaza, about 70% of the responses included a combination of these types of responses: the nuisance behaviors, bars, and drug activity. So those were sort of the main drawbacks from the plaza. I do want to say that although we did extensive outreach to make sure that we had diverse representation in our survey, we still had an overrepresentation of white respondents who were in the age group of 25 to 74. So we were short, we had an underrepresentation of younger respondents as well as people of color, despite our efforts. Okay, so once we had all of this information, we had to try to make sense of it and organize it in a way that would allow us to be able to look at trends and sort of weigh the responses based on what the city valued. And so the ways that we categorized what the city was looking for is we took the original recommended categories that was set by the council for us to look at, and that included public safety, economic development, beautification and infrastructure, and increased community activities and programming. So those were given to us to start with. We also added a layer of using the city council's goals as well to evaluate the responses, and you'll see that those included sustainability, healthy community, and racial equity. On top of that, we added some other factors that we thought were important to consider. One of those included diversity. Did these ideas celebrate diversity, and did they create access for all people? And then we also looked at the ease of implementation, and so the ability for the city to implement these ideas, and so we ranked those on likely, somewhat likely, or unlikely. And then as far as enhancements, did they create access, physical safety, and comfort to the users? So we used this criteria, and we went through every single recommendation, and then started to notice which patterns clumped together, and then took those scores and looked at them some more and talked some more, and we played with the data a lot. And as an end result, Karen, thank you for showing me how to use this thing beforehand, and I still can't seem to work it right. As an end result, we came up with these categories. And you'll notice that 4 of them were the original charge. The numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 are bullets. 2, 3, 4, and 5 on this list: beautification and infrastructure, increased programming, safety and regulation, and economic development. Those were all sort of given to us at the start. But then as we started reviewing the responses, we noticed an overwhelming number of responses that led us to adding a 5th bullet, which in this case is on the top, which was to increase access to the plaza and to so that we could connect better with HSU, the Creamery District, and Northtown as well. So what we're going to share now, what I'm going to share are the recommendations that rose to the top in those 5 areas. I still can't get it right. Okay. A couple of things that before we jump into those recommendations, as a task force, we felt that there were some sort of some guiding principles that we used as we were evaluating the recommendations, and these were some of the things that we felt were really important. First of all, that the recommendations that we put forward provide long-lasting and comprehensive changes to the plaza. We were looking to make recommendations that were significant, not just light little recommendations, so long-lasting, comprehensive. Also, that the recommendations should represent the diverse community opinions and interests. And then the next one, recognizing that that the plaza serves a lot of people in different ways, that there's a lot of roles that the plaza plays. We wanted to make sure that we were considering all of those voices. And then there were some issues that came up to us, as I'm sure you can imagine, that were bigger than what can be addressed by the plaza. And so we want to recognize that issues such as alcohol and substance abuse, as well as people living with mental illness and unhoused populations, are bigger than just the plaza, that's a citywide and community-wide, statewide and nationwide concern. And so although we did not address those ideas, we've realized that it's going to require collaboration with the City of Arcata's Public Safety Committee, as well as state, local, and federal agencies to help find solutions to those concerns. Did I go the wrong direction? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the first area was to increase access. And so we yielded a lot of information in this category, and you can imagine there were a lot of diverse ideas, and there were some ideas that were in conflict with other ideas. And so we did our best to try to make sure all voices were captured in this. As an example, there were people who felt very strongly about having more parking available. And in contrast, there were a lot of people who felt it important to have less cars on the plaza. And so the ideas didn't always hang together. And so we were conscientious and thoughtful in trying to represent all of those thoughts. So the first area that we want to talk about is wayfinding and signage. And so wayfinding, the main idea is helping people get to the plaza, and then once they're on the plaza, understanding what's around them and helping them find their way from the plaza to other spaces. That could include maps. It could include signs saying from Humboldt State University, the plaza this way, or once you're on the plaza, it could say Creamery District this way. It could have miles on them as well, so that people would understand that it isn't so far, that maybe it is walkable, to help encourage alternate means of transportation and access. Another idea under the wayfinding or signage is to perhaps work with Caltrans to have a sign on 101 indicating that the Arcata Historic Plaza is this way, so that people know to get off the road and come and explore. So wayfinding and signage we felt was something that rose to the top. A lot of recommendations in that area. Also improving public transit and ride sharing. Specifically, having more access, having less expensive access, and then having shuttles in the evening time as well, so that people can get to and from at late hours. And then also increase pedestrian safety with the idea of exploring some road closure options, and I'll get to one of those ideas in just a second. So here's one of the ideas. It's not road closure, but perhaps a different way of looking at our road system. In this image here, we see 8th and 9th Street, which are one-ways, but looking at extending the one-ways. And with that extension, it would It would allow us to move parking off of the plaza because the one-ways would continue going, and so you'd have the vertical slots. And in this rendering, you can see it could either stop at K Street or could run all the way into the Creamery District in that mock-up. So yeah, it would shift parking elsewhere from downtown, so it could move parking off of the plaza and shift it to other places. Also, another idea that came up was improving bike experience, and that had several ideas in that. It could be having more demarked bike lanes, as well as parking protected bike lanes, and maybe even some sheltered bike racks. And the idea had been mentioned a couple of times as well, to have potentially for events, to have a bicycle, I just forgot the word on that. What's that called? Thank you, bike valet, yeah. So those are some of the ideas that came up in that category. The next area was beautification and infrastructure. And the top idea here was to keep the plaza visually open, and with that, consider removing the planter that had once surrounded a statue. And so here's a mock-up of what the center could look like without having the planter in that space. The open space would then allow for a lot of variety of use of the center, so not limiting us in the ways that it could be used. Other ideas in this included facade improvement, and that could potentially, we could be working with the community development and see what resources are available to improve the facades on the plaza. Also to enhance the existing structures by including or adding art or murals. Interestingly, 27% of the survey respondents indicated that the plaza would be improved by adding more art to the plaza. And so we're building on that idea here. And then also to provide ongoing maintenance, such as to the planters and to the benches, which is already done, but just to continue to do those things. And then to ensure that all improvements are sensitive to the Wiyot culture and to all other cultures as well. So to be thoughtful in our selections. Pull towards me. Okay. The third area that we came towards, or that came to us actually, to improve the plaza would be to increase programming. And there's several ways that programming could be increased on the plaza. One is that the city could increase the types of programs that they're using. And as an example, perhaps in the past we had done something called lunch on the plaza, so maybe reinstituting lunch on the plaza. An event like this could be done in partnership with local restaurants, where maybe there's a lunch special that's served and maybe live music on the plaza, and so people could come, have lunch, take advantage of the restaurants in the area. Other ideas could include perhaps working with Humboldt State University and having an intern who could run events on the plaza, maybe family-friendly events where lawn games come out, and maybe there's music, maybe there's magic, maybe there's juggling, but to work with the university in partnership there. Also, we could potentially look for this through city programming to move some of the drop-in classes out to the plaza to increase the usage of the plaza and get more people out in that space. An example could be perhaps to have the ukulele club come and play outdoors on an evening in the summer, or maybe have the Nerf Wars group that rents the community center come out and have an event on the plaza. The idea just being that we get more people using it. The second area was to increase community partners in recreation, and so that could include art tours, rental items, live theater, music, movies. That's where people contract with the city to use that space, so to be more open and available for people to partner with the city. And part of that would be improving the permitting process so that events on the plaza are easier to organize, so that there's a more streamlined process. And then finally, to promote more arts and cultural events on the plaza, especially multicultural events. Okay, the next area was safety and regulation. And in this area, the first recommendation was to upgrade the lighting so that there's better lighting on the plaza, but to make sure that it is dark sky compliant lighting. And then to establish a safety corridor between the plaza and HSU, to utilize crime prevention features, crime prevention through design features. And this one, increasing the safety corridor, it sounds like it could potentially fit under access, and in fact it could, so there are some overlap in these. The reason we have it here under safety is that in the responses that we received in the survey, there were a handful of responses that said people didn't feel safe moving back and forth between the plaza and the city, and so we included it here. So the other area here, so you can see there's a mock-up here where perhaps a route, two different routes to the city, from the university to the plaza could be created in a way where there's lighting, there's signage, and increased foot traffic in those spaces to keep them safer. And again, we strongly recommend utilizing the Public Safety Task Force's recommendations on that, as well as the crime prevention through environmental design. And then the final area in here is to maintain or increase police presence and responsiveness and enforcement of the rules that are already in place to make the plaza a safer space. There's still more here, though. So in this area under safety and regulation, we also feel it was important to collaborate with service providers to establish a formal plan for support and programs for people in need of mental health services and addiction. So coming back to that idea from the beginning that we're stronger when we collaborate, we can do more together. And then also to explore additional regulations as they may relate to nuisance behaviors. And the task, again, the Public Safety Task Force had a lot of ideas there with regard to business hours and enforcement of ABC practices, bouncers, noise control. They're all in that report, so we didn't go into great detail there other than to say, do what they said. Okay, the last area was economic development. And so with economic development, it became clear that we had a lot of responses from people saying that we need to increase marketing, and that increased marketing can include outreach and routine activities, special events on the plaza. So getting more people to the plaza. Again, this comes back to signage as well. So again, there's overlap between these. And to promote restaurants and businesses on the plaza, including expansion of business participation at events. So some of the ideas that came up in this category, and again, they're much more detailed in your report, but included things like having sidewalk sales, allowing buskers, having food trucks on the plaza, and as well as perhaps providing space where restaurants could have an outdoor parklit space where people could sit outside and enjoy their meal. Other areas that were included in this were to consider more infill development so that we have a more concentrated population downtown, as well as work with businesses to provide a diverse range of options of affordability of products and services so that the plaza really does have something for everyone, not just those who have a lot of resources. So some future considerations. An effort to be effective going forward, we recognize that there'll be more funding necessary to make these things happen, and so we recognize that. So we encourage the city council to look at additional funding options to support these recommendations, as well as developing some matrix to see if these recommendations have been effective and if they've been implemented. So develop a matrix to determine whether they've been successful, implement recommendations in 12 to 18 months to assess the effectiveness, and then revisit on an annual basis so that the information that we sorted through and crafted and created and put forward doesn't just get stuck in a pile someplace and forgotten in a year. We feel it's important to pull it back out and revisit it. So in conclusion, it's our hope that the city will consider these recommendations and take action to improve the Arcata Plaza starting this year, and that you consider those the considerations on the last slide that were just mentioned, and in doing so that you select at least one of these recommendations from each of the categories to start with, and when feasible, that you move further and select more than one. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to the City Council for dedicating staff time to support our task force in its outreach and analysis efforts, and for dedicating the resources to improve the Arcata Plaza. And I'd like to specifically thank Julie for her leadership. It was a delight working with you. And Emily Sinkhorn, who was here earlier, but she provided us the guidance throughout this process. And then Kayla Johnson for her amazing attention to detail and keeping us organized in the process. So with that, the report.
So initial questions or comments from council?
No, thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I'm free to go.
Yeah. I don't have any questions.
Actually
Yeah,
leaving,
thank you so much. I know you guys put an enormous amount of effort into this. It was a huge commitment, and I really appreciate everybody's time on this. So I definitely have some comments, but I'm happy to wait until after public comment.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I want to say thank you, and thank you to everybody who worked on this, because it's evident to us that you worked well together and that you put a lot of effort into it, and so it's great. I also have thoughts and papers all over here, but I wanted to hear what people want to say, and then we'll come back with thoughts.
Great.
Yeah, well, thank you for all the effort and effectiveness, as other council members have said, and working together and giving us a wide range and in-depth set of options. So with that, I will open this to public comment. So if any member of the public would like to comment on this, please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Colin Fisk. I'm an Arcata resident and also the executive director of the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I wanted to first also thank the task force. I went to almost every meeting, and they worked really hard and came up with, I think, a really good and comprehensive set of recommendations for you to look at. I wanted to also highlight what Jane pointed out there, that the task force felt the need to add a fifth area of focus, which is this area of access to the plaza. And I think, again, sort of echoing things that I've said to you before, that we've heard many times, in the petition that we delivered to you and so forth, that this issue of access and the issue of design from what you would call a transportation perspective, I guess, is so important to the success of a public space, that we design it for people and on a scale, a people scale rather than a vehicle scale. And also, just to highlight one other thing which hasn't gotten a lot of attention necessarily in the report, but in terms of how these how these changes can work with the City Council's already established goals, in particular sustainability and the Council's recent declaration of a climate emergency. And given that transportation is the leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in the city, that having a plaza that sort of reflects the priority that we put on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and addressing the climate crisis. Is it the biggest thing that we can do to reduce transportation emissions? No, but nothing's easy, and this is a good important first step, I think. So basically, I just urge you to look at these recommendations. Particularly, I would highlight, of course, the bicycle and pedestrian improvements. There were a number of them that are throughout the report. And also, again, that you consider various options for pedestrianizing or street closures. And I think we've been talking about this a long time. The task force did a lot of work on it. City Council has had discussions on it in the past, and I think it's time now for you to put this on an agenda as an action item and discuss the options and make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Joanne, and I was able to attend the initial task force meeting that was here in this room as a member of the audience to find out who was on the task force and what they were going to be looking at. I also handed out surveys to different people and such to get their input, and I gave my input as well. And I do think that this committee was exceptional in its dedication to trying to find ways to improve an existing space in our community that needs improvement for the future. I was a little upset in the location of these task force meetings way over at the community center, and thought that it might have been more appropriate for us to have had these meetings closer to the plaza, even in a place where one could oversee the plaza and space was offered. So I just think sometimes when we're planning on something in your placemaking and looking at things, being in the place or near the place so you can see the place is helpful. And so I would like just to remind the council that when we have these task force put together, where they take place, in addition to who's in the task force and all, is kind of important, because public access to the plaza and public access to the plaza task force meeting is a kind of important thing. So I do applaud a lot of what is mentioned in this report. I do think one of the things that's sort of missing to me, and I appreciate Colin bringing up the climate emergency declaration, is the concept of an umbrella concept for the space. And I have long felt that this community could benefit by reminding itself that we want to be a peaceful place, and that putting the word peace in the middle of the Arcata Peace Plaza and creating a peaceful center to our community, and anything that happens within that space, must be something that is peaceful. And that takes care of a lot of the issues that are being mentioned about safety and use and abuse. And so I would just like, if not at this immediate time, when any type of dedication to the new and improved plaza comes about, that we consider actually renaming it or adding to its name the peace concept. And climate change is happening, and pedestrians will be prominent and cars will not. And so I think looking at that aspect is important too. So thank you. Peace.
Thank you. So if any other members of the public would like to speak on this, please come forward.
Good evening, Council. I'm Keenan Hilton, Arcata resident, and also at the Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. I'd like to echo what a couple speakers have said before and thank the task force that put that together, because it really seems like a very valuable document. A lot of careful thought went into it. So thank you for that service to the community. Overall, I think, something that I would love to see, and the most important thing, I think, would be putting this on a future agenda as an action item to take some of the recommendations and, of course, consider it. And that would be the time to have the community discussion about which are the highest priorities, what are different ways that these could be manifest, and think about that careful consideration, sort of narrowing down the scope probably to what are the most likely actions. I also really love the idea of having it be something that is returned to periodically, because this is a living space and it's the living center of the town, and we will be able to improve it forever. As long as there is a plaza, we will be able to make it a more livable and culturally vital center of the town. And I guess as a final point on the question of access and how we get to and from, it's something that struck me today when I was looking over the agenda and the packet, was just the idea of addressing bicycles, but also pedestrians, and how people with limited mobility get around. Calling that alternative transportation strikes me as kind of funny, because I was like, what's the alternative to me moving around in my body? It doesn't seem like an alternative. So that designing with people moving, whether it's on foot or on wheels of some sort, that really treating that as transit. This is how a lot of people move around our community. And I think that there is a real opportunity to improve the plaza as a space that's accessible to community members in their human bodies. That's all for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Connor McEntee. I'm a kind of new revived resident of Arcata. Been back for about a month. I was here 7 years ago for like a year and a half. And I have two distinct things I'd like to talk about. First of all, I also agree. I thought it was a great presentation. It was way more informative than what the news articles were giving us earlier. So, it's more complicated. Good job. I like the signs. I think that that's pretty good. I was living in Sonoma for a while. It helps people get around wine country. So I think that that's potentially a nice thing. The two things that I want to talk about, access, I want to provide, just a contextual counterpoint. And I don't, I'm an environmentalist, but I think that it's a complicated issue. In the month that I've been here, I've had two interactions with folks, one at the Minor Theater and one at the co-op, where the people that are working there are having bad days. And I'm like, well, why are you having a bad day? Well, I forgot that I parked out front or whatever in the parking, in the area that, it's the metered parking, and man, now I got a ticket. And, who knows where they're coming from and how they have to get into the community. I'm sure I don't know that well in terms of like rent prices, but if it's anything like Sonoma County, it probably isn't easy for somebody who's young working a minimum wage job to find a house anywhere near, So, their commute may be a little bit more difficult. That's something to maybe take into consideration when you're talking about road closures, decreasing parking space availability to folks who are trying to provide the services to the businesses that are there for everybody else to enjoy. The second one, I'm working in healthcare here now, it is inextricably linked, the drug addicts and the drug abuse and the alcohol abuse, with the transient and homeless populations. And I appreciate that, we want to work with the collaborators and, different partners. But I think that it's to take an action like this that's going to really directly impact that community without providing them some kind of an outlet, some kind of a solution, without having like dedicated funding, dedicated solutions, to that, to just kind of take an action and push it down the road and say that, hey, we can just deal with it some other way and it's a bigger problem than what the plaza is, I think doesn't do justice what that issue really is and what you really need to look at when you're looking at talking about removing that population from what they more or less call home. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Hi, I'm Joan Dunning. I'm a resident, and I am lucky enough to have both of my kids live here in Arcata and be surrounded by a lot of 30-somethings, all their friends. And so I get to hear what they have wanted for the plaza, even though none of them have participated in this process, and I don't think we're ever asked anything. I was kind of asked to be here tonight to say that I think music is so important to them, and the ambiance of the farmers market during the summer. I think they would like to see the music continue during the winter. And we kind of thought that McKinley would go away and a covered bandstand would magically take his place. And then every time we'd mention it, they'd say, well, you couldn't keep people from sleeping in it. And so it seemed to sort of go away. But to a whole lot of young people, it seems obvious that a covered bandstand would vitalize the farmers market during the winter so that it would be a year-round thing, so that Arcata wouldn't sort of go to sleep during the winter and everybody goes to Mexico. I mean, it would keep it alive, more alive. There could be music without trying to figure out how to keep everybody dry. And it seems like it would be a visual message of vitality and youth. And so anyway, I was sent here as a messenger from a bunch of people who would love to see it figured out. Well, how do you keep a covered bandstand from just being a hotel? Instead of just throwing it out, you figure out, well, how do you do that? And keep the idea so that there can be music year-round.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Emily. There's no bus service on Sundays. I think that's an issue. I agree with Colin and the rest that we need to put that on the agenda, public transportation / bike lane / pedestrian lanes. Also, I don't know if you're aware of Arcata House trying to expand to the building out off of Samoa. I don't know if they're still trying to do it, but I think they are. If I could do some more research, I don't know if you guys have promoted this idea. I think they're trying to buy the building from HSU. This could be a way of helping our homeless population, having more resources for them, working with an organization that's been doing it and has been doing it pretty good. So, thanks.
Thank you. If any other member of the public would like to speak, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to council.
I have a couple of responses for the public. This gentleman, Connor, you know, I don't think there was any intention to move the homeless off the plaza. Okay, I got from what you said that you felt like this was going to sweep the homeless off the plaza. It's never mentioned, and it's certainly not any of my intention. So whoever exists on the plaza now, they can stay there and be accompanied by more people. So just so you know, that's not an intention that I have seen or that I have. The idea of a covered bandstand is great, and I think the simplest way to do it is have a large pop-up so it can be put up and taken down. And a permanent structure seems to have some inherent problems, but a very large pop-up will definitely do the job. So that's where I am on the music thing. That's perfect. They can play under a pop-up, don't have to have an expensive thing over them that we have to walk into, because whatever it is, it doesn't float. It's going to have poles, so now we don't have the open thing anymore. We have to walk through it. And Emily, I'll talk to you about that building on Samoa later. Thanks. That's it for now.
Do you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. When we say parking protected bike lanes, what does that mean?
There's different ways to design protected bike lanes, and one is where you would have your sidewalk, then you would have the bike lane, and then you would have the parking, as opposed to bike lane next to the lane of travel.
Or like where the parking shares the bike lane? Is that? No, that's not what it is, but it's the opposite of that, where there's space for
There's
both.
actually a photo in your report.
closest to the
curb. The bike lane is closest to the curb, and then the parking basically protects the bike lane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Versus what you see mostly on the plazas, you've got if you're coming down 8th Street, say, you've got the curb parking, and then the bike lane directly adjacent to the lane of vehicle traffic.
And currently we don't have that. Okay, thank you. Currently we don't have that anywhere in the city, right?
I can't recall a place. I don't recall a place that we have it, parking protected.
We have
bikes.
buffered, I'm going to let nature speak on that one.
Go ahead.
Page 14 in your report shows a
Yeah.
picture that shows
But
what
where do we have it in Arcata?
I don't think we have it in Arcata.
We do not have protected bike lanes yet, but we have buffered bike lanes on Valley West.
Valley
3
West.
foot, yeah, 3 foot buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane. That's a sort of a protection for the
Right, it kind of
bicycle
comes
lane.
and goes
Yes.
around the horseshoe.
That's true.
We discussed this when we reconfigured 8th Street. That was probably, 10 years ago or something like that? 10 or 12 years ago?
And then another question I had, the increased access to the plaza area number 5, it says experimenting during events with doing closures. That is something we are already doing, right? And then so on 4 in the first section, the concept of designating 8th and 9th Street as one way from F to K or N. I didn't find anywhere in the report, unless I missed it, where there was kind of any, I mean, there was one section where it talked about it, but it didn't provide any background on where that came from. Is that, has that been looked at by the Transportation Safety Committee? Why? Yeah, is there data, what's behind this to where it landed on a specific recommendation?
One of our task force members brought that as a suggestion that they had heard from other people in the community. And one of the things that was appealing to it was it actually provided a compromise where you really could, if you had a one-way on those 2 streets, you really could accommodate more types of transportation. And depending on the design, you might be able to actually get more parking at the same time.
And then, so, as this is a report with, with recommendations for us, we're not able to accept any of these recommendations tonight? I mean, can't we just approve stuff tonight?
You can accept the report. You don't have to accept the report in terms of a protocol piece. One of the things that we provided for tonight or any of your future discussions is just a listing of the priority items that the chair went over tonight. So that's the kind of 8.5 by 14 sheet of paper. The option that the chair brought up was if you could even indicate if you had a preference to pick maybe one from each category. I think the message is that, we've talked about a goal setting. We're obviously not going to be able to do everything in the report. It's certainly not the first year. So if there were things that you wanted us to start to price out for you to consider in the budget process, knowing what those priorities are tonight or at some time in the near future would certainly be beneficial. But yeah, you absolutely could approve, accept the report. You can make recommendations tonight, whatever you see fit.
Sorry.
Keep going.
I've actually got a lot more. Sorry. So just, I was kind of starting from the top and going as quickly as possible just to share my thoughts with the council and staff and the public on the wayfinding and mapping signage. To me, the visual pollution thing is a thing. And, I would be okay with looking at maybe doing a sprinkling of it. But it's not something that I want to see kind of heavily done. Just if there's an efficient way to do it, I would be interested in looking at that.
And maybe we could look into doing it electronically, because so many people, get their information that way.
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
It doesn't
So
have
maybe
to
that's what it is. Yeah, sure.
I mean, we have things at HSU that are unobtrusive, that are maps of the campus.
Sure, yeah.
So I think that there's much a greater visual impact from things that are visible in somebody driving by in a car versus somebody who just stops and looks at something that's only visible to a pedestrian.
Right. Okay. And improve public transit. The next one. That's something I absolutely agree with, and we are already having discussions on. We could probably refresh some of those discussions, but we have been talking for a while now. We've met with HSU, and I've talked with Eureka Council members about it. But just the concept of trialing a a evening kind of late hour shuttle that maybe just, for example, to experiment with it, it just ran on Friday and Saturday evenings, maybe till midnight, something like that, and it just had 3 stops: campus, the Arcata Plaza, and downtown Eureka. So that is something that we, we're working on and having conversations about. And so for me, in the first section, I'm fine with everything except number 4. I would need to see more data on that. And I don't know. I could see like we can approve multiple things in every category, and then maybe we prioritize them. We don't have an expectation that they'll all get implemented immediately. And beautification and infrastructure. I pretty much agree with all of those. I'd be happy to support all of those. Okay, so number 1, I 100% agree with removing the planter from the center. I don't see any reason why not to. I think it would look a lot better as an open space, and it'd be nice to see how people take advantage of that space if they choose to, with the planter removed. And right now, it just seems like a safety hazard to me. I see people jumping up in there, kids are jumping up in there. I've seen people like during events set up their booth in there. So yeah, it's a little odd to me, and I would totally support making that one a priority, just because it seems doable. And creating visual enhancements to existing structures. One thing was listed was crosswalks and painting crosswalks, and that is something that has come up recently with us working with HSU to try to collaborate more and make the city a little more welcoming to visiting parents, and so maybe painting some crosswalks if they're near campus, but on the city side or the HSU side with HSU colors, just for example. But there are definitely challenges around it. So to me, I'm kind of on the fence with it right now, but we are talking about that. And what else? Oh, and then number 5, ensure that all improvements are sensitive to WIAT and other cultures. I absolutely agree. And I'm wondering if we have sent this report to the WIAT, and if not, if we could please do that.
We have.
Thank you. The next section, I'm just yes on all those. Just the only comment I have is on number 1 on increasing city programming. In my time working with seniors at the community center, one thing that's come up a few times is the desire to have art classes for seniors. So, I think that would be programming that I've heard requested and would serve some of our constituents. Safety and regulation. So the first one, I'd like to see examples of dark sky compliant LEDs. Do we have any of those in the city right now?
Yes, we do. Sorry about that. Yes, we do. The lights outside of the D Street Neighborhood Center are dark sky compliant.
Okay.
The lights at the library and the community center are dark sky compliant.
Okay.
And I think the new lights that are by the transit center, which are the decorative lights, are also dark sky compliant.
Okay. All right. So I will, now that I know that, I'll pay extra attention to them and check them out. Yeah.
I think especially the ones by D Street. D Street on D Street, going from the community center, D Street, up to 11th. Mm-hmm. Those new ones they really work well. They're
great.
They light up the ground rather than the whole world, and they are easy to deal with. And it'd be great to see those, excuse me,
oh, you're fine,
take over the whole corridor from HSU to the plaza. If you had those same lights, that would be a great enhancement to the safety corridor.
So yeah, that one I'd like to see those lights myself. Other than that, I'm a yes on all those. And the last category, number 1, I believe that is something that we already do, but we can continue to do that. And the only other comment I have is on number 5 under economic development, work with businesses to provide a diverse range of options and affordability of products and services for consumers. And that's just, one that I always, what's the city's role in in business in the city, and versus how much is that, fall on the entrepreneur to find something that they're going to have customers for, that they're going to have people, interested in their services or products. If we can identify those things, then we should absolutely support. We did, that kind of came up in the economic development presentation, just trying to identify those types of businesses. So, I mean, the vast majority of these I totally agree with. I'd be happy to, approve these recommendations, and maybe at a future meeting we can prioritize them.
So I think starting at the beginning, for somebody who's a pedestrian and is not familiar with Arcata, that having something like HSU, where you have signs that are visible and readable, is important to feel comfortable to go beyond the plaza, to know businesses on the plaza, and to walk out into the neighborhoods. Other parts of Arcata is important. I don't care as much about having lots of signs for cars, because we don't want people to be confused, but it can provide a lot of visual clutter if we do too much of that. As I'm somebody who drives about 300 miles a year and only gets to the plaza by walking or bicycling. But anyway, what I find is that the plaza, as far as being a bicyclist or pedestrian, feels like one of the safest places I could possibly be in terms of being a bicyclist or a pedestrian. I feel much less safe in further out areas. And so I think that rather than closing off the plaza to cars or decreasing parking, I think that what we need to work on is to make it more comfortable for people to travel the whole route on foot or on a bicycle to the plaza, and focus on that. And so I would support extending 8th and 9th as one way from F Street to K Street. I think beyond that, we're sort of beyond the influence of the plaza. But I don't want to decrease parking. If anything, I would want to increase parking on those two streets and just make it feel safer for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Just really quick before you move past that one, does staff have an opinion on the 8th to 9th one-ways from F to K?
Are we trying to kind of give you ideas and then you're going to research them a little bit more? That's the way I thought
right now
we were doing
it's
this.
the idea and concept, and we have not analyzed in detail. So definitely once you give us a recommendation, we will take that idea and try to see and come back with options. What is the best way we can design, which way the bike lane should be, or where should be the bike lane.
Right, yeah, that's what I thought I understood.
Without the statue, I think that the center planner is sort of a white elephant and really isn't useful anymore. And so I like the idea that Vice Mayor Patino has of a pop-up tent. And as Ms. Downing said about music, I think that's important. And I think that those two go together well without creating new problems. One thing that was mentioned in the report is that the biggest drug problem we have on the plaza is alcohol, not the other drugs. And so I think that, the other drugs are a problem, but I think alcohol is the biggest problem. So I think that one of the suggestions would be to ban any drink promotions and happy hours. I don't think we need that people, if they want to drink alcohol, they can drink alcohol. I don't think that we want to provide ways for people to drink more alcohol after work. And one thing that was also discussed in there was the possibility of requiring that the bars have their entrances in the back rather than on the plaza. So I think that's something to consider. Most of these other ideas I think are good in terms of more programming, more activities, drop-in programs, rentals, multicultural. And some of these are going to be constrained by our budget, of course. Things that are more expensive, there's some things that are very little cost. There are things that are staff time, which is still a cost, and there are things that require physical infrastructure. And so I think we have to be aware of our limitations in these relatively tight budget times. Safety corridor to have more comfort from HSU to the plaza, I think is good. Effective police presence, I don't know if we can do that in a way that stays within the budget. We've got, things are tight as far as costs for police now. And I think a lot of people are ambivalent about police. They like them when they're in their protective function, but a lot of people feel that they're the heavy-handed hand of the state and of the dominant culture coming down on people. And so there's that negative feeling that a lot of people have about the police. At the same time, they might recognize the positive role of the police. And I think having ways of engaging service providers with people who have mental illness or are need services, I think that if we can have more of that could be important. Connecting with more with Open Door or with Arcata House Partnership is important. And also, as we increase opportunities for non-traditional businesses on the plaza, I think we also have to be sensitive to the impacts on existing businesses on the plaza. And I mean, there'll be some conflicts, but I think to be sensitive to that. And those are the comments I have at this time.
Okay. Well, I agree with pretty much everything that everyone has said. One thing I haven't heard mentioned is the concept of streamlining the permitting, which I know we're always trying to do that. It seems like we're always trying to do that. But I do see, I've heard from people it's expensive to rent the plaza to put on an event. And so if we want to have a plan where we're changing the sense of we should have some kind of thought, maybe it's like for a couple of years, we're going to lower it, and we could, maybe ease it up back, because I know we like to get full cost recovery from our staff when people put things on, but still, I feel like we want to encourage that kind of thing. And I really love the idea of, badminton and little games and things going on there. I think that's like a Tuesday night type of thing. I think that's suggested. I think that's a really good idea. Probably a couple of different things that I would say that is slightly different. I do support the 8th and 9th being one way. I'd love to see that analyzed anyway, and see how we could maybe make traveling safer and make more parking. I appreciate that. I'm not a fan of banning happy hour. So just going to say that straight out.
Well, as a non-drinker, maybe I'm biased.
Well, there you go. But the one thing I really do want to talk about, because this came up, I think it came up when we were, when we had the discussion with you like 6 months ago or something. I think that's where this came up. That idea of the alley behind the bars and cleaning that all up. Because what I see here is a lot of little things, little cleanup, little better, things, which is good. That's good. But it's not like astonishing. It's like no one's going to probably really notice if we change the lights that much. But if we really change the way that side of the street is, and I don't even know the legality of this, but I'm just going to kind of dream for a little bit and say we can do this. So let's say we, say the alley behind the bars. I was thinking, is there any way that we say if you only serve alcohol, your access is from the alleyway, and we have it clean and nice, and we make it sort of a pleasant place. But then it's from the other side, maybe if a bar or restaurant has food, then they can have the access from the other side, and they can use it. And I can see that maybe we could close part of 9th Street down, or maybe even 9th goes all the way into the plaza. Maybe we could shut that street down because we got so many great extra parking places from our one-ways on the other things. So this is, like I said, this is a bit of fantasy. But I was imagining, what if we changed that section there? Kind of like our most nightmare section of the plaza to some degree. And we made that, where there's food carts, where there's, maybe there's a little bit of things being sold there, kind of, something how we just change that whole feeling there. And I like the idea of having some of the entrances going out, you know, I mean, you got to be careful because 2 in the morning alleys, I mean, we got to make sure it's right, but we would have to maybe sure we have lights there also. So that to me is kind of an exciting idea because I feel like that changes things. That's really saying, okay, we want to see this place a little bit different. So I get excited about that idea. And then another couple of thoughts I had, it seemed like we could look at a little bit more policy changes. We're considering more infill development. Maybe we've already changed our policies there, but you know that would be policies of like you don't have to provide parking, so you can go up 3 stories or 4 stories or something, and you know, we'd want to be careful about light and stuff. But anyway, I recognize, and since people have been coming here and asking us for a car-free plaza, you know, I get the love of that idea, but every time I research that about in Europe and who's doing that and how does that happen, it's always a town of about 80,000 people. And, you know, we're 18,000, and we don't have that density, and we have so many people that our stores need people to come in. And so I'm not ready to go there yet. But again, like I said, I am ready to maybe look at 9th Street. Like, let's look at changing that and see if that stimulates something. And then I was also, just today, I was at a chamber board meeting, and they were talking about promoting restaurants and businesses and how we should all be doing Yelp reviews, taking Instagram pictures of ourselves doing things, you know? And it's funny because, I mean, I realize I've never done a Yelp review. I have no idea how to do a Yelp review, you know, and I'm not on Instagram. So I am not the market, I suppose, but it's just, I think these things really matter, and the more kind of good quality reviews we have for places, that's how people pay attention to that, you know. I do search Yelp reviews, actually, to tell the truth, when I'm looking to go somewhere. So somehow, if we could encourage that, or maybe we have the chamber do a short workshop on how to do a Yelp review or something. I mean, I don't even know if that's, maybe everybody else knows, so maybe we don't need to train ourselves, but anyway. So those are just my couple, like the other stuff, I mean, I kind of, you know, put years, and most everything was, you know, 1 to 2 years, maybe 2 to 4 years. Some things are 1 to 5 because they're ongoing, you know. But I feel like a lot of this stuff is pretty doable fairly quickly, you know, and then maybe we can, you know, if other council members are interested, maybe we can think of something kind of bigger like that 9th Street area and the alley behind it, and really changing things up there. So that's kind of my response to this. And again, I just want to thank you guys so much, because this is really thick, and I feel like I could look at this a few times and I'll see more other things in it. Because like I did read some of the, what's the task force, what was it again, the public safety task force stuff. And, you know, I appreciated some of their thoughts there about, like, limiting single bottle sales of alcohol from the liquor store. I could do that before I get rid of happy hour, you know? But, you know, so things like that, I can kind of, you know, like if we can target things that are causing us problems. I mean, I don't want to affect people's businesses too much, you know, but if it's, you know, if that makes sense, I could go to that thing. I mean, I could do that where we have within a half block of the plaza where we just have slightly different rules about how alcohol is sold or something along those lines. So that's where I'm at with this.
I'd like to go into mine. You ready?
Yeah.
On the first section, the wayfinding mapping signage, I'm constantly asked virtually every day, which way is the plaza? And I think, you know, maybe the signs that we have or the way we make signs are too complicated. Maybe we just need to say the plaza, 2 blocks, you know, and have it on every street that points to it. Just really simple, the plaza. It doesn't have to say historic Arcata Plaza, blah, blah, blah. Just the plaza, because that's all they're asking me for. The number of bike racks, it's ridiculous. Every time there's an event, we don't have enough bike racks. Never have enough bike racks. And so we're encouraging multimodal transportation and not having any place to put your bike. So if you go up on Farmers Market on a nice day, I mean, you know, there is no bike parking that's sufficient. So I think that's something we really, you know, putting one bike rack or two here or there, it's not enough. We just really need to ramp that up. When I looked at 8th and 9th, I've been driving them every day. How would it work? How would it work? And I agree, crossing K to me is a complication. So being one-way to K, and the only thing that really came up to me as far as unintended consequence is the co-op parking lot. So the co-op parking lot has multi-ways to get in and out. It's a screwed up parking lot. They should have redone it years ago and they decided not to. But in the one-waying of 8th and 9th that I absolutely support, the co-op has got to change some of their entrance, and it actually will help them instead of people being confused driving in, driving out, driving around. They'll just have a couple of options. Thinking about what to do with that center space when it's cleared out. When we looked at that picture up there and you looked at that circle in the middle of the plaza, I thought, Christ, it's not that big. It can't be that big because it looks giant once you take out the barrier, the steps and all that. And so one thing that we do here already is we have pastels on the plaza. And that center section could be an elite pastel. And it could start paying for itself. You know, like Brett and Susan and Michael said, I agree with almost all the other stuff. There's just a couple things that I wanted to look at. It's like the streamlining, the current permitting process. I don't actually understand how difficult it is outside of coming up with the money. So it is a big space, and it's not ever going to be cheap, just because it's too big. Safety corridor, again, I'd like to see lighting. You know, the biggest complaint, lighting. When I walk around at night, I'm not afraid of the dark, but the people behind me, they're following me because they are. So we need more light. There's lots of places we need it, but if we're going to improve our relationship with Humboldt, why not make a really nice pathway with good LED lighting, maybe even a few arrows to say, you're on the right path to the plaza, you know? And also on the HSU side, you know, they have those blue telephones. And I would like to see them, their part of the safety corridor is to extend those blue telephones toward the plaza. And they may tell me that's impossible. I don't think it makes sense to say that, but it's for student safety. Everybody knows what those blue phones are for. And if there was one or two on the way to the plaza in that safety corridor with proper lighting, I think people would stream in much better, especially people that are coming from cities where you go where it's well lit and you drive where it's dark. And we're trying to get them to walk where it's dark. So we have to change that thinking. About the parklets, you know, where you put in sort of a restaurant situation in front, I'd like to see something be, you know, some kind of figured out way so that all the restaurants would have that opportunity. And I'm not sure that that exists right now, especially when you just step off the plaza by like a half a block, Don's Donuts or somebody like that. You go, well, if I was on the plaza, I could have a big table out here and have all my customers out there during the summer. But when I'm on the side there, close by, I don't have that opportunity, yet it's a popular place. I agree with the mural painting, you know, more murals we can get, especially if they're something that's not permanent, where it's put on, photographed, advertised, and then erased, and we put a new one on. With the parking on 8th and 9th, you know, in my mind, when you one-way, one lane, herringbone the sides, you end up with some more parking. Along with that, if we look at the parking in Arcata and needing to have city lots be paid parking and not 8 hours of free time, I think that would help. So I think the linking the parking and the changing of 8th and 9th with paid city lots so that we get turnover, and not $5 an hour, but, you know, something, a fraction of a pack of cigarettes. How's that? 2 cigarettes worth an hour, you know? I think I'm done. Thanks.
Well, yeah, just one other thing. I mean, I don't know what to think about it exactly, but I support security cameras. It's a public place. People should not really assume that they are not on camera, and it just feels like that area needs it. So, I don't, you know.
I support that now. I didn't 15 years ago. Yeah.
To me, looking back at this, I think there's just one that I just don't have an interest in right now. It's just the very last one, the city working with the businesses. To me, that's kind of more of a chamber thing, maybe more of a Main Street thing.
Yeah, you know, I didn't give it any years. I mean, I kind of looked at it and went, huh, I don't know. I don't know where to go with that one.
And so, you know, I would like to try to get some momentum on this to keep it moving. And I guess you know, it seems like unless there's other no's, council members have strong no's on. I'm just wondering if, to me, okay, first of all, I just want to say the safety corridor thing, I feel like we got to rebrand that, because it's going to confuse most people.
Right.
I think to the majority of people, the safety corridor is the road you take between Eureka and Arcata. Yeah. If you ask an HSU student a general question about the safety corridor, they're probably going to say which one. So I don't know what that rebranding would be, but yeah, I think, you know.
The HSU Plaza pathway.
There you go. I like that. Yeah, we got it. So, okay. So yeah, I mean, to me, I think it would be cool if how we picked, you know, just maybe if this comes back to us from staff before the next meeting, or, you know, in the future when the mayor decides to re-agendize this, and we do the whole, you know, kind of how we pick our committee spots. Yeah, we prioritize it. And then when we talk about it again, you know, even before the staff does any analysis, and then we start with our ideal list. This is just an idea. We start with our ideal list of priorities and then see what that cost looks like. And then, you know, maybe during budget setting, we all decide how much money we want to set aside and just kind of see what fits in.
There's like, I think there's 5 in each one of these things, and if we, in each section, and there's 5 sections, if we did a 1 to 5 in each section, and then pass it off to staff, and then we could come back to the agendized meeting with that matrix.
Exactly.
So if sometime before the next meeting, we fill out the matrix, our priorities, 1 to 5 in each section. They get it. We come to a meeting. We've all got it, and then we can
talk about it.
I would like to have rough costs for things, because I think that's going to make a big difference in my priorities.
Well, I understand that, with the exception of the centerpiece. I don't care how much it costs to tear that center out of there. That's a priority in my mind. Population looks at it and says, you took the statue away, and now how glacial do you fix the center? And I think that they're waiting for us to take some action. And so if it takes the whole, whatever we got to take that center out of there, we should do that as a, symbolic change.
Well, I think what you're saying is that it's so important that even if the cost is relatively high, it's still important enough to do it. But I think it's still helpful to know what it would be.
Yeah, of course. I'm not saying to ignore it, but for me, out of this whole list, that has to be number one.
So maybe what we could do is we could come up with some of our ranking and then give it to you and then come back and then you could, look into some of those projects. And then, so we're not telling them that because we ranked to them and all three of us will put it as a 1, we want to do it. It just means we are definitely interested. And so we need the feedback and then we could continue making decisions.
Without Sophia here tonight, our ranking isn't going to be 100%, obviously. So,
yeah, well,
if we could do a preliminary.
Can we just sort of do this on our own and give it to you, and then you can come back to us and we can put us
yeah,
okay.
sort of.
You could tell Sophia about it. She could do something. So I have a question about the beautification and infrastructure section, number 2, because that is like Institute of Facade Alley Improvement Program, which is kind of about half of what I was hoping to. So, I kind of took the story a little bit farther than that because I felt like we had that conversation.
But you could rewrite the item. You don't have to take it as written.
Well,
You can edit it to be more what you want.
Okay, but then if we're ranking, we won't be all working with the same thing. So I guess I just wondered about that. I could just put my energy and say my whatever number I give it there for that, but maybe we know that and then if it ranks enough, then we can have a conversation about what we would actually do and what we want staff to look at.
Well, and if the council's supportive, you and I could rework that one, and then we can just email this out to all 5 of you to do your ranking from. If we want to add a little bit of language to that for them to consider.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that if other people are. Okay.
Yeah, no, and I hear what you're saying, Mayor Winkler, and about the budgeting, and it's like, the first question is, well, what is our budget? We know we have the $150,000 set aside, but we're not going to have that conversation for, I don't know, maybe a couple months or so. And I don't know, I just don't want to, what can we do between now and then? And if it's, I've discussed the priorities, but I totally agree with you that, the cost is definitely a factor for me as well.
Well, and some of these things, we maybe have even budgeted in this year's budget. Have we? It seems like potentially upgrade plaza lighting to dark sky. Have we? Is that in this year's budget? And it seems like we've been working on this safe path between HSU and the plaza for a couple of years. So I would think that some kind of lighting.
No, and actually, some of these things we're already doing.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we decided we would do that, and then we'll just re-agendize this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then staff can get back to me and when it can fit in with the agenda and the time it's going to take for them to do some more research on these items.
Okay, but I'm hearing we're going to do some prioritization before we're doing a lot of research and cost analysis.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Well, I think what we said is we were going to rank it ourselves. We'll give it to you. You'll give it back to us all ranked. We'll talk about different things, and then we'll be able to give direction on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
I feel that that's perfect.
Yeah, don't
I
search
think
anything
costing
out.
every single one out is really going to determine a little bit on how far do you go on 8th and 9th Street, Is it a pop-up or is it an actual band? Some of that conversation, if it became your top priority, I think would be important before we started giving you design
We
alternatives.
need another cut at this before we give it
perfect.
back to you.
Right, I think we're done then. Right.
And maybe we just want to thank the task force again very much. You guys just did a fabulous job. Thank you so much.
Next new business item is item B, initiate a ballot measure to increase limitations on government-funded affordable housing. Could I have a staff report, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to start by asking that we leave up this very affirmative message through the staff report. Been appreciating it. I will, it's getting late, and this topic I assume is that you fully understand it based on the staff report. So I'm going to leave it to questions for the most part, and just let you know that what we're asking for tonight is direction to initiate a ballot measure to reset the city's Article 34 limitations on rent-restricted units in the city of Arcata. If there's anything that you don't understand about this, I'm happy to go into a lot more detail, but I do want to note that there's potentially going to be a parity ballot measure completely eliminating Article 34, which would make our initiative moot, or our ballot measure moot.
So you're saying that from the state, they're looking at putting something on the ballot that would get rid of Article 34? So
entirely.
Oh.
So our ballot measure would be increasing the limit because we're nearing the cap now. The statewide ballot measure that's been introduced in the Senate, which has broad support, and in fact, to date, no opposition, would completely eliminate Article 34, and so those limitations that we would be looking to raise would no longer be an issue.
So you don't want us to have a ballot measure?
I do want to have a ballot measure just in case the statewide measure
Doesn't get there.
Doesn't get
Okay.
there or doesn't pass.
Okay. Question I had, it's a 50% plus one? Or is it two-thirds?
No, I believe it's a simple majority.
Thank you.
What's your estimated cost and amount of staff hours it'll take to do this ballot measure?
I'm going to defer to the city manager who knows a lot about the elections, more than I do.
I think in terms of staff costs, putting together the actual language, it's probably only about 10 hours of staff time total. You'll have some city attorney review, and then we already have 3 seats open, and then potentially, the open space ballot measure. So my experience with elections is adding another item on the election itself is really, I used the number $3,000 for the open space, or maybe it was a fluoride one that we talked about. I really think it's less than that once we're already paying for the bulk of the election, unless you end up with something that's like 5 pages long that people need to read, which we won't in this case. So, I would say beginning to end, you're going to be under $3,000 in staff time and ballot cost.
So what is the recommended number, and how did we get to that number?
Right.
I would like to defer that discussion till a future council meeting. We haven't gone through the detail like Environmental Services has to poll it. I think that right now our current number is 5% or 250. We're much higher than 250. And so we're relying on the 5%. The state requires that, if we looked at our regional housing needs allocation, state requires that we provide a certain percentage of units affordable to low-income people. And so that would be kind of probably somewhere around an upper end, is mirroring what we see in our regional housing needs allocation. And then on a lower end, probably, somewhere on the order of 7 to 10%.
What was the upper end?
The upper end, and I'd have to look at the specific numbers to get them for you, but I think the number is around 40% of our housing stock from the regional housing needs allocation is required to be for low income, moderate to low income folks. And so if we use that as the number, 30% of the housing stock as a upper end, to say that that's what we're required per the state to provide for, as a total housing balance, that could be an upper end. Alternatively, a lower end, somewhere in the 7 to 10% range, would allow us within any given housing element cycle to meet those housing element objectives without setting a goal that was intended to drive the entire housing stock to mirror the RENA process.
Could we remove the cap in Arcata?
Could we remove the cap in Arcata? No, I believe that the state requires that we establish an upper limit. And if it's not done on, on the basis of the total housing stock, it would have to be done on individual housing projects, so that each housing project that came forward would have to have a vote in order to approve it.
Could we have a very high limit?
We could, yeah.
What's the maximum?
Maximum would be 100%. And I think that, if you set a limit that was 30%, which 30 to 40%, which, would mirror our RENA, we would still, that would be a lot higher because you calculate it based on the total housing stock, so it would be a lot higher than we would actually need to accomplish that RENA goal.
What's the downside of doing 100%?
It would probably, face some opposition from voters.
Well, you couldn't build anything but affordable housing if it was
it
100%.
doesn't make any sense.
You could build anything.
I'm just asking.
Well, okay.
You could build anything you wanted to build. Builders could come in and build anything they wanted to build. What it would allow for is that the city or other partners that have funded projects that would be limited by Article 34 would not face that limitation.
Okay.
So 100%, if you said 100% of the housing stock could be affordable housing, even though we would never get there, it would effectively eliminate the limitation.
Sure.
Potentially, you could generate some pushback from folks who, were
Misunderstanding it, saying that means all you're going to build is affordable housing, and I don't want to live in a town that's all projects.
exactly.
So do you have a recommendation?
I don't have a full recommendation right now. I wanted to get initial nod from the council to start working on this, and then I'd bring back a lot more detail on what our recommendation would be. Again, just sort of back of the napkin calculations, I think somewhere around 7 to 10% would be sufficient for us to meet our housing goals. Would buy us decades. I mean, the current limitation was based on a 1992 vote. And, so we've gotten, a couple decades out of that vote. Certainly if the Article 34 isn't eliminated entirely, increasing the cap to 10% would buy us another several decades.
Okay. Yeah, I'm okay with it. I definitely think it would have made more sense to me if there was an actual recommendation or we had some numbers, but that's fine with me if we want to move forward with it.
I would be fine putting a just off the cuff 10% number on it is something that I would be comfortable supporting as a ballot measure.
The recommendation says that council initiate ballot measure. Is that what we're doing here, or we're?
Yep. Oh, go ahead. Basically what we're asking for, there are several milestones that need to be met in order to get a measure on the ballot. The first one being the 25th of May, when the full language of the ballot measure would need to be developed. And so essentially I'm trying to get a nod from the council at this point. Where we'll start pursuing that. We'll bring back language and recommendations on, the exact amount. If the council wants to say 10% tonight, and we'll get working towards that May 25th deadline, that's fine too, but we'll certainly check back in and let you know what that 10% looks like.
So now I'm confused because the recommendation here does say the council initiate a ballot measure, but you're saying that that's not what you're asking for.
Direct us to begin the process of initiating the ballot measure. Yeah, sorry for the confusion.
Before initiation.
Okay. So because that actually wasn't on the agenda, I mean, is that something we can, it seems like a different action to me.
No, I think that it's comprehensive. Initiating implies you're taking the first step. It doesn't, you have to adopt a resolution to place something on the ballot. And there's no resolution here. So you're initiating a process, and I think
Which gets him able to do the work.
Exactly.
He feels like it's worth
and
it.
if you choose not to adopt the resolution, that's still an option available to you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I'm supporting it.
Do we need a motion?
I think it would be good to have a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to initiate a ballot measure for the November 2020 election to ask voters to increase limitations on the number of affordable housing units that may be produced in the city.
Up to 10%?
10 or more. I don't know.
At this point, I'm kind of with 10% because that's doubles what we have, and it's more digestible to people. People would probably vote yes, whereas if you said 100%, even if it doesn't mean 100% of the houses would be low income, that's what people would think.
It would scare people.
And they go, what?
Ultimately, we have to bring back the resolution.
Yeah.
And so I think that we would want to have more analysis around what the number would look like and what staff recommendation would be at that time.
Okay.
And so I'll use 10% as a guide, and I'll evaluate that. I'll evaluate this upper end. 38% is what we have of the RENA, and just kind of plot that out for you and let you know what that would look like in terms of total number of units.
So you're saying we have 250 right now, units, or no, are these just units that the city has some fiscal investment in, and that's why that triggered this, or, because it seems like we have more.
No, the 250 was the original 1992 ballot measure said 250 units or 5% of the total housing stock. We have about 600, a little more than 600 affordable housing units in the city of Arcata, and the majority of those, close to 400, I think, have assistance or some other tie that would qualify them as Article 34 units. And so there's a balance of around 50. I mean, there's some rounding that goes on, and as you add an affordable unit, that adds to the total, and so there's some, scaling that happens as well. But without getting into those details, we do have closer to 600 units of affordable housing.
So I just feel like, I don't know, what are we basing, or we're just kind of like, well, we got 5%, let's just double that 5% to 10%. Well, it feels kind of...
the
Well,
thing
it's all
that...
random.
Yeah,
I mean, 100% random, too.
Right.
Yeah.
The thing that comes back to me is our RENA number, and it's like, well, it would be more logical to me for us to say, well, what do we have to meet in that RENA number? And if that's 25 or 30%, well, then that's a reasoning.
Well, so maybe we've
I
given
agree.
you enough, you could work between those and come back maybe with a range, and we could think about it as when we see the full language, and is that okay? Because even RENA numbers, I mean, it's a little abstract, because it's, as I remember, it was like, I can't remember the number, like 17%, very low income, whatever it was, it was like 40-something. What I remember being amazed at, it was like 40-something% we need to actually do higher income stuff. We don't ever talk about doing that, which is like the doctors' houses that we don't have.
They could buy
because
2
we don't
little
have
houses.
doctors. I know, but, we have to recognize we want a community.
Yeah.
We want some doctors, we want some dentists, we want people to live here, we don't just want everybody who needs doctors and dentists, and we don't have them, so, anyway, but I guess, so it's a little unclear to me what, the number is that Arena is saying that we need. So maybe if you came back with some of that, you could work with that number, with the 10, and somewhere between that, we can figure out what we...
I forgot where we are. I was making a motion. Did somebody second that?
I think, no, because I added the 10%, and then we started questioning that.
Yeah, I'm still confused on the percentage, so that's why the recommendation would have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're asking for tonight is that you initiate the process. We'll come back with a formal recommendation with an actual percentage that would, and explain what those percentages would what they would do over time.
I guess I don't understand why we have to vote on that. Why couldn't you just, I don't know, yeah. I don't understand why we have to vote for you to come up with a recommendation.
Well, we're just making a motion to initiate the ballot measure.
It's very analogous to the parcel tax item that came before you. The staff brought you some options, and you gave them direction, and I honestly can't remember if it was by...
And that's what, we don't even have the options in front of us.
Well, yeah,
We have no data.
he's just asking for, he wondered if we were interested enough to even
That's cool,
bother to
but-
put the work in.
So to me, that would have made more sense in his recommendation. Yeah,
I guess there's a lot...
I'm just trying to make sense of it.
There's a lot of effort that could be saved if the council just says, no, we're not interested, we want to stick with 250 or 5%.
Well, because most likely that's going to move forward in the state, because the state is all about housing right now, and you said there was no opposition, so, I mean, in some ways, we're wasting a couple $1,000s.
Well, and there's no political opposition that we've seen from the elected bodies, but we don't know if there will be opposition that gets to the voters. I mean, until we really see, how that polls.
Right.
And it, it might be that we decide to pull out when, when we start to see how that materializes. But there's also been legislation for many years that has failed in the state around this item. So they've come back with this option to go to a ballot initiative on it. So
Well,
we'll
yeah,
see.
I do see the point of why we want to do this, just because it's not that expensive for us to put it on, and then that way we've solved our problem no matter what.
Right, and we're near our cap already.
Yeah.
So do we have a motion?
We have a motion, I think. Bridget, could you tell me what it was?
Latino moved to initiate a ballot measure for the November 2020 election to ask voters to increase the limitation on the number of affordable housing units that may be produced in the city.
Second.
Okay, there you go.
Good.
All right, so I will open this to public comment. So if any member of the public would like to comment on this item, please come forward.
Go along and support, I support this. I also think that the cap should reflect our housing plan, and 30% sounds best. I think if I understood all of that, 40% is what we're going, is what we need to produce, and then I think 30% is, like, I think we should go above 10% for sure. That's it, bye.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to comment on this? Please come forward. Seeing none, I will close public comment and take it back to council. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Right? Thank you.
Okay.
Right. Finally, oral and written communications. This time is provided for people to address the council or submit written communications on matters not on the agenda. At the conclusion of all oral and written communications, the council may respond to statements. Any request that requires council action will be set by the council for a future agenda or referred to staff. Speakers addressing the council will be limited to 3 minutes.
I'll be quick. I just, three things I like to think about, past, present, and future, as I come to these city council meetings. In the past, I think, and I'm reminded that I'm on We At Land, and I like to remember that to myself, but sometimes out loud too. So I remember that. Present, I remember David Josiah Lawson, and I like to say that out loud sometimes at city council meetings. And for the future, I want to remind the City Council we are in a declared climate emergency, and I always want us to think about that in any decisions and determinations we make for this city in a climate emergency declaration. Thank you.
Thank you. So next is council and staff reports. So reports from staff.
No report tonight.
I don't have anything, Michael.
I just have a couple things. Saturday, I attended the operating engineers crab feed with Mayor Winkler, and I don't think I mentioned it at the last meeting, but did I mention the bike repair station at the last meeting? The bike repair station? Did I?
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah. The Rotary Club of Arcata Sunrise, their community service committee, donated $900 to the city to purchase a bike repair station, and the staff just a couple weeks ago installed it right in front of City Hall, and I've seen several people there using it. Just today when we were having our meeting in closed session, there was somebody outside using it, which is just, really cool. So it's nice to see something we put in getting used, and thank you very much to the community service committee of the Rotary Club of Arcata Sunrise.
Nope, I'm skipping it.
Well, I just, on Friday, I will be attending another meeting of the Road Charge Committee. We haven't really met for a while, and that's partly because of Senate Bill 1 that went through that provided transportation dollars. But Senate Bill 1 is really looked at as kind of something that'll probably carry us for maybe 10 years, but at that, we're getting more efficient, maybe, and there's a lot more electric cars. And so what we're doing is we're really having conversations about how we will be paying for roads in like 10 years. So I'll report on that when I get back. And then the Chamber of Commerce is having their dinner this Saturday night, and it is sold out. So that's good news. I'll probably see you all there.
Good. I also went to the crab feed. And there was a delegation from the Norwegian consulate in San Francisco, and focused on two things. They were focused on the aqua farm, which has if it's built, would be built by this Norwegian company. And they also are very interested in the offshore wind project, because one of the partners in the offshore wind project is a Norwegian company. So I'll have a chance to talk to people from the Norwegian delegation. And I sat with a table of people from Del Norte, and they're also very interested in offshore wind, because even though Humboldt County has great offshore wind potential, Del Norte County has even greater offshore wind potential. And so there was a harbor commissioner from Del Norte who's very actively studying and interested in that, and is also interested in the possibility of Del Norte County or Crescent City becoming a board member of RCEA. And no dates of future meetings. And we are adjourned.